Chapter 2014. Completely one-sided. Everyone had not even prepared themselves for it, and the battle had already ended. So fast. No, how could a battle of equal cultivation levels end so quickly? The opposing side had to have concealed his cultivation level, and used his superior cultivation level of dividing soul tier to suppress his opponent. But when they thought back carefully, they discovered that this theory was off too. Though they cultivated different cultivation techniques, the cultivation level would be clear the moment an attack was launched. Even though Feng Dang's actual cultivation level was still quite vague, it was definitely not the dividing soul tier, and they could confirm that fact. It was possible that he was a king tier, and was invincible among his peers. Everyone suppressed the shock in their hearts. After all, they were only a group of sailors and merchants, so how could there be king tiers among them? What king tier would come out to be a sailor or a merchant? I am Lu Yi, and my cultivation level is also the equivalent of fourth severance. Please. Another young man from the side of the ancient castle leaped out. Let me. Pang. One person from Qin Wei's party had just leaped out when he was sent flying with a single punch. He was completely no match for his opponent. This time, everyone on Qin Wei's side was moved. Could king tiers appear one after another like this? Looking closely at Feng Dang and Lu Yi, the aptitude of these two people really could not be considered all that impressive. What king tier did not have an amazing skeletal structure? In that case, they were not king tiers, nor did they have an advantage in cultivation level, so why did they possess stronger battle prowess? There was only one answer. The cultivation technique they cultivated was too powerful. Was that really the case? I am at Yang Soul tier, and I would like to seek guidance. Someone from Qin Wei's side leaped out, issuing a challenge to the ancient castle side. I am Mo Han. A young man walked out, strikingly handsome, and having a kind of might that could ensnare others. My cultivation level is equivalent to fifth severance. Fifth severance. When these words were spoken, a great many people on Qin Wei's side looked puzzled and blank. Fifth severance. What was the fifth severance? Wasn't the fourth severance the end of the line for the severing mundane tier? So where did this fifth severance come from? However, there were also some people that looked disbelieving, so stunned that their heads were about to explode. That was a monarch tier. Ling Han's eyes also lit up, the confusion in his eyes becoming more pronounced. Taking Xiao Jun and his group into account, that would be 4 monarch tiers. How did monarch tiers appear in the Eastern Celestial Realm? Accumulation through numbers. Using a population of 100 million as the basis, only a single monarch tier would be born, and merely having the aptitude of a monarch tier was not enough. Without a celestial king tier level background, which provided benefits such as the natural peach seal, how would he survive the heavenly tribulation of fifth severance? Could it be that there was a celestial king on this island? The population here was clearly pitifully few, yet 4 monarch tiers had actually appeared amongst them. This was not logical. Furthermore, just what the heck was the cultivation technique they cultivated? Ling Han thought back carefully, and suddenly a sense of familiarity rose up in him. He felt that he seemed to have seen the way these people fought somewhere else before, but no matter how much he tried to remember, it did not seem to match anything in his memories either. Pang! On the other side, Mo Han had also begun fighting with the person from Qin Wei's side, and similarly had solved the issue with a single move. This was very normal. In terms of cultivation level, fifth severance was equivalent to Yang Soul, and those that could advance to this cultivation level were all monarch tiers, and could be invincible even with a gap of 2 levels. Then wasn't it very normal that they could win instantly with a single move? The spars continued. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, the ancient castle side had an absolute advantage, and even if they were weaker by 1 or even 2 minor levels, the ancient castle side could still manage to win. This gap in power was really astonishingly wide. Those on Qin Wei's side all lowered their heads, their faces flushed red. Just now, they had thought themselves infallible, and thought that the people in the ancient castle were all overly subjective and disregarded the outside world, so their strength definitely would be very poor. But once they fought, they found out that every member of the opposing side was a fierce fighter, which naturally caused them much embarrassment. I really had not expected that everyone's strength would be so. Hee, Xiao Jun said smilingly, wanting to say something, but hesitated at the end. However, Everyone clearly understood the meaning that he wanted to express. And that was, "You are all too weak. And you said that you would show us your skills? Yet each one of you are weaklings, not one capable of being a qualified match." These words caused their heads to dip even lower. A hint of mockery flashed through Xiao Jun's eyes, and he continued, "Master has no intention of hiding secrets, so I am willing to share the cultivation technique that we cultivate with all of you." What? Hearing these words, everyone raised their heads, their faces filled with disbelief. Techniques would not be taught easily, and this was the ancient rule. To say nothing of an outsider, even with their own people such as father and son, that core secret technique could not be taught easily. Continuing with the example, a father would have to be sure that this son was worthy of being nurtured. For example, in a great clan, only a limited number of core clansmen would be able to cultivate the highest grade of cultivation technique, while the others would cultivate something that was slightly inferior. In any sect or clan that was the case. Only the minority or even a single person could cultivate the highest level of cultivation technique. But now, Xiao Jun actually said that he would take out the cultivation technique that they cultivated and share it with all of them. Everyone exchanged looks, and thought that they had heard wrongly. Was there really anyone that kind in this world? Actually, our cultivation technique is very simple. What is most important is to lend power, Xiao Jun said without concern. We believe in a deity of this heaven and earth, and only need to sincerely ask for his help during battle, and he would be able to bestow endless might on us. Are there any volunteers? We can try it out on the spot, and I guarantee that your battle prowess will immediately increase several-fold, or even tenfold. This filled many people with disbelief. Merely with them believing in a deity, their battle prowess would directly soar to as much as tenfold. I will. One of them jumped out. Believing was fine. If it was useless, then he could just give up the faith. Xiao Jun pulled that person over with a smile, and whispered into his ears for a while. It was really just a short while, and that person skeptically walked to the training grounds, and said, "Little Hai, come and spar with me. The two of us are close in strength, and we have frequently sparred. Whether my strength has increased or otherwise, it would become clearest after a spar with you." All right. A person from Qin Wei's party jumped out. The two of them began to fight, exchanging blows, and it was completely indiscernible which of them was stronger. It was useless. "Believe in the deity," Xiao Jun spoke up, his voice slow and unhurried. That person from before suddenly became serious, his mouth muttering words. It was not known what he was saying. All of a sudden, he became stronger, and began to beat down on his opponent. Then, he became stronger and stronger, his battle prowess having increased 4 to 5 times. Fuck, it really was doable. Everyone was stunned to the point of speechlessness. This was practically even better than ingesting celestial pills. You only had to believe in a deity, and your battle prowess would increase a good few times. One could not believe this, but would also incredibly long for this. "Young Master Xiao, can I cultivate this cultivation technique?" "That's right. Can I too?" A considerable number immediately called out, their faces incredibly excited. No wonder there were so many king tiers and emperor tiers here. In fact, there were even a good number of monarch tiers here. So that was why. Xiao Jun showed a smile, and said, "Master has never cherished his own skill to coerce others. With the intention of benefiting the whole world, he is willing to share the unique cultivation technique with everyone." Hold on. A soft exclamation rang out, and Ling Han stood up. He leaped into the arena. "My fists are itching as well, and I would like to spar." Just now, he had finally recalled why he would think that there was something familiar about the movements of those in the ancient castle. He remembered when he had been in the ancient realm, he had once entered into a mystery realm. There was a mysterious river flowing there, and there were a considerable number of tribes along the banks of the river. These people were all cultivators, yet belonged to a completely different system of cultivation. They did not cultivate regulations, or rather they did not cultivate the regulations of this heaven and earth. Their power originated from that mysterious river. Ling Han had once traced the river to its source, but he could not venture there. Only Xiao Gu went, and a massive battle had broken out. In the end, Xiao Gu had returned with injuries. This was exactly the same. Chapter 2015. danger. Previously, Ling Han had not managed to recall it, because those people from the ancient realm were too weak, and there was no possible comparison between the two. It was only now that he felt some kind of strange change taking place in those two statues by the doors, transmitting an amazing power to the person inside the arena, and only then did realization dawn on him. Clearly, everyone in the ancient castle was more covert when they borrowed power, or rather more proficient, and Ling Han was unable to sense it right until that newbie made an attempt just now, which finally allowed Ling Han to capture some traces of it. This was a completely new system of cultivation, but was also a system of cultivation that Xiao Gu despised to the extreme. Ling Han did not know the people here, but he knew Xiao Gu, so he was naturally on Xiao Gu's side. Furthermore, the methods of Xiao Jun and his party practically could not be more evident. It was a pretense that they were asking them for a spar, while the truth was that they were showing off their own strength, and thus tempting all of them to cultivate that so-called technique with them. There were indeed kind people in this world. This was a fact that Ling Han admitted, but was there anyone so kind that would take out his own cultivation technique to share with others? And furthermore, a group of complete strangers whose origins they had completely no idea about at that. This Ling Han did not believe. No matter what, he did not believe it. If something was too unusual, there had to be something off about it, and added with Xiao Gu's dislike, he naturally was going to stir up trouble. Aren't you guys showing off your superior strength? Then, I will be the one to beat down on you people, and let's see who's stronger then. This brother does not believe in our strength? Xiao Jun asked calmly. You should be in the dividing soul tier, right? Young Master Xiao, this person has no relation to us. That's right, we have drawn a clear dividing line between him and us a few days ago. Please don't allow him to be a reason for ruining our amicable relation. Those from Qin Wei's side all clamored, fearing that Xiao Jun would suddenly change his mind, and say that he would not teach them the secret technique that could allow them to become powerful in an instant. Meanwhile, Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, I am presently at the late stage of young soul. In terms of cultivation level, you are a match for my junior brother. Xiao Jun turned his head and looked at Luo He. Junior brother, you go and spar with this brother. All right. Luo He stepped out, and leaped into the arena. Ling Han raised his clasped hands. In polite courtesies, he made no mistake, and made no mention at all of the fact that he had once seen this kind of cultivation system before. I am Ling Han's brother Ling, please. Luo He raised his clasped hands, seeming very humble, but there was a hint of contempt in his gaze. Ling Han strode out, and did not use any kind of movement technique. He merely strode out rapidly, quickly approaching Luo He. Luo He scoffed internally. His opponent was going to be serious right from the very first move, and make it a close-quarters battle? He was filled with utter and complete disdain for these people of the celestial realm. All the expressions on his face were merely an act. See if I won't beat you up with just a single punch. He raised his fist. Boom, with a wave. There was no light of regulations, or a single flicker of any great Dao seals, yet the attack carried an incredibly terrifying suppressive might. This was a completely different system of cultivation. Ling Han smiled faintly. Who cares what system of cultivation you cultivate? In the end, it's all down to battle prowess. He clenched his right hand into a fist, and then launched a punch. Without any kind of technique, and without any kind of logic, it was just a simple forceful punch. Pang! The punch landed, and Luo He's figure turned into a tiny black dot, crashing into the wall of the training ground. Thankfully, this place was deliberately used for the purpose of battle, and was a different space. Otherwise, he would definitely have caused great damage with his collision with the wall. Even so, Luo He's whole person had still sunk into the wall. He coughed continuously, his face astonishingly pale. Hiss! Complete silence fell. Everyone was looking at Ling Han with a stunned expression. The people of the ancient castle were stunned because they were sure that they were invincible in a battle of equal cultivation levels. Even if they were a minor level weaker, they could still turn the situation around. But now, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, Luo He could not even withstand a single blow from Ling Han. This was something they could not accept. And those people on Qin Wei's side were even more shocked. They had spent a longer time with Ling Han, but all of them had thought he was just an ordinary young soul tier. Now that they had suddenly witnessed his true might, this was practically inconceivable to them. A considerable number of people wanted to stomp and pound their chests in frustration. Previously, they had actually drawn a clear dividing line between themselves and Ling Han. It should be known that this man was a monarch tier. What was a monarch tier? Only a prodigy that was destined to become a celestial king could be called a monarch tier. They were overwhelmed with regret. Previously, they had endured a calamity together, and this was the best chance for them to nurture a friendship, yet it was they themselves that had spoilt this completely. Pigs, they really were as extraordinarily stupid as pigs. Brother Ling is indeed very strong. Xiao Jun showed a hint of seriousness, withdrawing the contempt that had existed all this while in his eyes. Being able to defeat Luo He with a single blow, this was powerful strength. Let me try. He stepped out. He was a minor level higher than Luo He, and could also defeat Luo He with a single strike. Otherwise, he definitely would not be asking for his own humiliation. Come then, Ling Han said calmly. His motive was very simple, and that was to make sure everyone knew that there was no need to believe in that so-called deity. The Tao of the celestial realm was also wide-ranging and profound, and was worth their diligent study. Xiao Jun leaped into the arena, and assumed an offensive stance. Please. Please. The two of them spoke at the same time, and then launched an offensive towards the other. Boom, boom, boom. The moment they clashed, both released powerful moves, holding no reservations at all. To Xiao Jun, he had to re-establish the powerful name and invincible reputation of the deity, so he naturally had to defeat Ling Han as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Ling Han wanted to set things right. Similarly, he wished to defeat his opponent to show that he was right. Destroy this place if you can. Small Tower suddenly piped up. Ling Han paused. He had indeed wanted to ruin Xiao Jun and his group's conspiracy, but had not planned to destroy them. There are rules in the heaven and earth. This kind of completely different system of cultivation can be considered a challenge to or even a betrayal of the heaven and earth. And when there are many people who cultivate this kind of cultivation technique, it could even shake the regulations of heaven and earth, causing this whole space to collapse, Small Tower explained. That's serious? Ling Han frowned. At first, he purely wanted to cause trouble, but if it really involved the survival and continued existence of this space, then everyone had a duty to act. He gave a "e" and asked, the system of cultivation here should be the same as what we saw at the ancient realm. Why didn't you say this at that time? Are you an idiot? Small Tower said in disdain. At that time, just how much of my memory had recovered? How could I have possibly known this? Right, no matter what, it was in the right. In any case, it was fine as long as Ling Han knew the proud tower's temper, and there was no need to take it to heart. All right, then he just beat this guy up first. Ling Han roared and unleashed his full battle prowess. Instantly, his power increased over tenfold. Just now, he had been distracted, and conversed with Small Tower. This naturally affected his battle prowess, and now once he was making an all-out effort, it was like he was a changed person. Everyone watched with captivated eyes. Those who were weaker in strength could not even catch sight of the two fighters. What more distinguish which of the two of them had the upper hand at present? But those who were passable in strength all showed expressions of shock. Previously, it was Xiao Jun who had the upper hand, but later it was like Ling Han had been pumped full of adrenaline. All of a sudden, he had become indescribably strong, and it was he now that was beating down on Xiao Jun. Meanwhile, Luo He's and Lan Ruaji's expression were filled with disbelief. In their eyes, Xiao Jun was an invincible prodigy, yet now, even when he was at an advantage in terms of cultivation level, he was actually still incapable of restraining Ling Han. Instead, he had now fallen into a disadvantage. Impossible. How could this be? Chapter 2016. Belief. Those on the ancient castle side all paled in great shock. They were filled with absolute confidence in the cultivation technique they cultivated and the deity that they worshipped, and reality had also proven that their system of cultivation was really superior and noble uncountable times. Did you think that Ling Han and his group were the first people to come to this island? You would be wrong. Who knew how many batches of people had come here? But after they had arrived here, there had never been any who left. But now, an outsider whose cultivation level was inferior to Xiao Jun could actually beat down on Xiao Jun. It should be known that Xiao Jun was the best in terms of natural talent among them. If even Xiao Jun would be defeated, then there would be no one capable of being a match for Ling Han in the same cultivation level. This had overturned the superiority complex that they had maintained for all this while, and also caused a sliver of crack to appear in their confidence, shaking the belief that they had in their deity. Xiao Jun roared furiously, trying his best to turn his disadvantageous position around, but all that was merely wasted effort. Ling Han was simply stronger than he was. Though he was not very much stronger, when one had reached the level they had, how could they afford the slightest gap? When the battle had progressed to close to 1,000 exchanges, Ling Han shot out a kick. Pang! Xiao Jun was sent flying, and crashed solidly into the wall. Brother Ling is indeed strong. Xiao Jun rubbed the discomfort in his chest, and forced out a smile. Ling Han smiled faintly and replied, "Good battle." He did not listen to Small Tower's words and directly killed the man, because this was the latter's territory. There were a good number of Immortal Palace tier-level elites alone, and that island master that had been in seclusion all this while was even likely to be an ascending origin tier. If he killed anyone, that would mean turning completely hostile, without any way out. Hearing Xiao Jun admit defeat personally, those on the ancient castle side all broke into a commotion. The deity that they had believed in all this while practically crumbled in an instant, and they could not accept it. Xiao Jun was unconcerned, however. Instead, the smile on his face became even more pronounced as he said, "Brother Ling's natural talent in cultivation is really astonishing, and if Brother Ling is willing to switch to cultivating the vein of cultivation technique of my master, I can guarantee that Brother Ling's strength will improve to another level." When everyone heard this, they all nodded. Just now, that other person had just believed in some deity, and his battle prowess had improved 4 to 5 times all of a sudden. If the same logic was applied on Ling Han, just how strong would he be by then? And also precisely because of this, the people on the ancient castle side also recovered their confidence quickly. That was right. What conflict did Ling Han being strong have with their deity being strong? As long as Ling Han was willing to switch to believing in their god, Ling Han would be able to become even stronger. Then, didn't that mean that there was not the slightest bit of mistake in their choice? Seeing the increasingly heated gazes all around him, Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. Looks like all his actions previously had been wasted effort. Firstly, these people were too captivated, and secondly, Xiao Jun's adaptability was extremely impressive. Otherwise, he only had to fly into a humiliated anger, and it would deepen the doubts in everyone's hearts. The situation would definitely not have been like it was now. Interesting. He was a good opponent. A smile appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. Though Small Tower's words were very frightening, to actually be able to shake the foundations of the heaven and earth, who knew how many people were needed to cultivate this cultivation technique to be able to accomplish that? As for merely those 30-odd people gathered here, no more than a drop in the ocean. Then he'd just play, and cause a great disturbance. The best scenario would be waiting until Lu Herong came here, and sweeping this entire place over with a single push. To those who stayed in this heaven and earth, the people of the ancient castle were akin to vermin that would affect the existence of the heaven and earth. Though it was now a majestic tower, and was definitely not something that a few bugs could damage, if these bugs were not quickly stomped on, who knew how far they would develop? Just like the 30-plus people today being bewitched by Xiao Jun and his group, how many of them would throw themselves into these welcoming arms? This kind of poisonous vermin should be eliminated immediately. "Young Master Xiao, please teach us the celestial technique," someone called out shamelessly. "Please teach the celestial technique." Even more people called out. A slightly proud expression appeared on Xiao Jun's face. A situation that could have possibly been complete chaos had returned to the original course with just a few words from him, and even he could not help but want to cheer for himself. "There is no need to rush. My master has a great wish to teach the technique to the world, and definitely would not keep the treasure to himself," he said with a slight smile, seeming extremely sincere. This touched the outsiders incredibly, and they felt that the island master was really the kindest and most benevolent person in this world, being willing to teach a supreme cultivation technique without any reservations. There was definitely no other person that could be as generous as that. Ling Han smirked internally. At first, he had been curious why Xiao Jun was so determined to teach the cultivation technique of his master, but through Small Tower's explanation, Ling Han now knew that this was an invasion. Once it succeeded, to the entire celestial realm, no, to the celestial realm, ancient realm and all other small worlds, it would be an absolute calamity. And going by that logic, the explanation of their island master being presently in seclusion, and thus unable to decide whether to allow them to cut trees, was actually a falsehood. Their motive was merely to prevent them from leaving the island. Those that are willing to cultivate this cultivation technique, please come with me, Xiao Jun announced loudly. Immediately, practically everyone followed behind him. Aside from Ling Han. Ling Han was stunned. Even Qin Wei had fallen for it. Very soon, the people here had all left. Aside from Ling Han, only Lan Ruaji, this delicate and bewitching woman, was still seated in a graceful position. Her arms were stretched out and placed on the chair's backrest, causing her breasts to become even more pronounced. A smile appeared at her lips, while her alluring eyes were filled with challenge. Ling Han was unlike the others, who were easily hooked. This spiked her interest. She wanted to personally pull Ling Han over to their side, and once she succeeded, she would have her 17th consort. That was right. She enjoyed playing with men, and any man that she had her eye on, no matter how much of a prodigy he was, would not be able to resist her charms. Young Master Ling is really so awesome. Having been here on this island for so many years, this is the first time I have seen eldest senior brother defeated in a battle of equal cultivation level, she said delicately, her voice like asterisk 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 and incredibly melodious. Ling Han smiled faintly and stated, there are about 1 or 2 dozen people like me in the Eastern Celestial Realm at least, and there would be even more in the Western Celestial Realm. Who cared whether there really was or not? He would just brag first, and find out later. Meanwhile, Lan Ruaji smiled alluringly. Young Master Ling, just now eldest senior brother asked you if you were willing to join us. A supreme technique will be taught to you, so even while your cultivation level does not change, your battle prowess would increase tenfold at least. Wasn't it said that your father has the wish to spread his technique without any reservations? Why is there a need to join you? Ling Han asked smilingly. Spreading the technique is one matter, but the truly amazing part will only be taught to the innermost core portion of people. Isn't that right, young Master Ling? Lan Ruaji suddenly straightened her upper body. When she said, isn't that right, she tapped her finger lightly on her breast. Underneath the tight-fitting fabric, the outline of her extremely seductive plump breasts was fully displayed. Ling Han ignored it completely. In terms of looks, there was no way she could catch up to the Empress and Hu Niu. In terms of bearing, the Empress left her behind in her dust. In terms of allure, bewitching Maiden Ro was completely out of her reach. Even bewitching Maiden Ro was unable to move him. What more this kind of woman? Thoughts streaked through Ling Han's mind like lightning. If he was to destroy the force on this island all alone, this was completely unrealistic. Then, there were only 2 paths laid out in front of him. First, wait for Lu Herong to arrive, and then destroy this place. Second, he could feign civility with them first, and then take the chance to build a ship and leave. Then, he could come back later to destroy this place. Whichever the case, he could not immediately turn hostile with them at present. Thus, Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, on the contrary, I am slightly interested now. Chapter 2017. Lan Tianyu. A proud smile appeared on Lan Ruaji's face. She was confident that her charm was unmatchable. How could Ling Han possibly be capable of resisting? This really was her being arrogant and narrow-minded. Just how many people were there in total on this tiny island? She was indeed pretty and alluring, and naturally had become an unrivaled bloom. However, if she was in the Eastern and Western Celestial Realms, though she could still be considered a beauty, she still was some way away from the extent of an exquisite beauty. It could not be helped that she had never seen truly beautiful women, and naturally thought herself to be overwhelmingly beautiful. Come, young Master Ling, I will show you around, she invited. She should feel lucky that Hu Niu had not appeared now. Otherwise, the latter would definitely have sent a slap straight at her. Ling Han nodded. This was just good, as he indeed wanted to get to know this island better. The 2 of them first walked around inside the ancient castle. Previously, their range of movement had been restricted, but now with the daughter of the island master leading the way, he naturally could go anywhere freely. Where does this place lead to? Ling Han asked, pointing at a pair of stone doors. Previously Lan Ruaji would directly push the doors open whenever they met with doors blocking the way, but now she completely ignored these stone doors. Ling Han examined these great doors closely. There were actually formation patterns inscribed on them. Clearly, there was a formation laid out here. If one could not unravel the formation at the first instant, the formation would either attack the invader harshly, or proceed to raise an alarm. Lan Ruaji smiled delicately, and said, "This, you would only have the right to find out after you truly become one of us." So mysterious? Ling Han pretended to be very curious. Hee. Yet Lan Ruaji's lips were sealed very tightly, and she did not leak out the slightest bit of information. Instead, she dragged Ling Han away with her. Afterwards, when Ling Han repeatedly drew the conversation back to this topic, Lan Ruaji kept using the same excuse to evade the topic. Only one who had become a member of the ancient castle would have the right to know further secrets. The two of them walked on, and soon had completed their rounds of the entire ancient castle. Ling Han suddenly frowned. He had sensed an unusual aura. What is it? Yet Lan Ruaji did not sense anything at all. Ha 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 ha, as expected of a prodigy among prodigies, to have discovered my presence so quickly. A long bout of laughter was heard, and a man with lanky build walked out from behind a massive stone pillar. Fourth uncle. When Lan Ruaji saw him, she hurriedly greeted him politely. Ling Han also surveyed this man. He looked very young, his black locks hanging haphazardly over his shoulders, and his features were also very handsome. Most importantly, this man was very strong, giving Ling Han a feeling of unfathomable depths. "I heard that someone defeated Xiao Jun, so I came to take a look for myself," this young man said. In any case, age could not be distinguished from the appearance in the celestial realm. It was possible that a gray-haired old geezer would have to address a young brat as great-grandfather. "This is Ling Han," Lan Ruaji introduced. "This is my fourth uncle, Lan Tianyu." Ling Han raised his clasped hands slightly, and said, "Lord Lan." Lan Tianyu flicked out a finger. Wang, he summoned a circular ring, which encircled all three of them. In Ling Han's eyes, the world had enlarged indefinitely. He had immediately appeared in an expansive and boundless grassy plain, and from the outside, it was clearly Ling Han and the others that were rapidly shrinking down, becoming who knew how many times smaller than even a tiny rice grain. This was a spatial god tool, but it was not the type to directly draw others in. Instead, it affected the surrounding environment. Ling Han could directly fly off and leave. He only had to exit this area, and he naturally would be able to return to his original state. He was slightly displeased. Though he did not fear challenge, the action of directly pulling him into a battle zone without his agreement caused a strong feeling of dislike to rise up in him. This kind of person was asking to be beaten. "Come, show me." Lan Tianyu pounced, charging out towards Ling Han. He naturally cultivated the other kind of cultivation system. As he sent out a palm strike, there was no ripple of Great Tao, nor was there any light of regulations of the Great Tao. There was only a shadow enshrouding his palm, exuding an unmatchable evil, yet also astonishingly powerful. Ling Han's hands balled into fists, and he greeted the incoming attack. Pang pang pang. The two of them were embroiled in an intense battle. In a short instant, they had exchanged over a dozen blows. Lan Ruaji watched with starry eyes. Although she, too, had monarch tier-level strength, she still felt like she was unable to watch the battle clearly. These two people were too powerful. She was naturally clear and familiar with how strong Lan Tianyu could be, but what stunned her was Ling Han, as he was actually capable of exchanging blows with Lan Tianyu. It should be known that Lan Tianyu was even stronger than Xiao Jun. She knew that Ling Han had defeated Xiao Jun, but definitely did not think that Ling Han would have strength to match Lan Tianyu. But now? Facts spoke louder than words, causing her to watch with wide eyes, and making her passion burn ever brighter. She liked powerful men as they would bring her a feeling of accomplishment that was incredibly amazing. Unfortunately, though there was no lack of handsome men among the young and middle-aged men that had drifted onto their island, none of them was as strong as her in a battle of equal cultivation levels. And now Ling Han had popped out, causing her to ignite all of a sudden. Boom, boom, boom. Ling Han and Lan Tianyu were still exchanging blows. They would be fighting rapidly at times, exchanging several dozen blows in a mere instant, but sometimes they would also be fighting extremely slowly, only launching an attack after being in a stalemate for 3 to 4 breaths. But in reality, the slower the attacks came, the higher the danger level was. Both sides were releasing powerful moves, and their destructive ability would be higher. Of course, this danger was actually referring to Lan Tianyu. With Ling Han's physique being as strong as it was, there was basically no one in the dividing soul tier capable of killing him. If it was not for the fact that he was unwilling to reveal this trump card, he would be completely capable of using his own injuries to trade for injuries with his opponent. And then Lan Tianyu would tragically discover that he would be covered with injuries, close to death, but Ling Han would be completely fine. Lan Tianyu was indeed stronger than Xiao Jun, and it was not just by a little bit, either, putting an extremely great pressure on Ling Han. Going by Ling Han's estimation, this man's true battle prowess should be equivalent to peak stage Earth Souls level, and then after extracting the so-called deity's power, his battle prowess would soar into early stage Heaven Souls level, or even the extent of middle stage. This was enough to match Ling Han. In fact, this was slightly superior to Ling Han. Thus, this was the real reason why there were so many monarch tiers and emperor tiers on the island. That was not their true battle prowess. Fourth uncle, is it fine now? Lan Ruaji called out from the side. All right. Lan Tianyu stopped, a prideful expression appearing on his face. Though victory was still undecided, he had enough confidence that he would have had the upper hand in just a few more moves. And he was sure that Ling Han, too, knew this fact. Since he already got the upper hand, he naturally would be satisfied with ceasing the battle. After all, the reason for his exchanging blows with Ling Han was not for killing this young man, but so that the latter would know that there was still someone capable of suppressing him here. Ling Han also smiled faintly. In terms of battle prowess, it was indeed Lan Tianyu that was just that slight bit stronger. That was because Ling Han's own cultivation level was too low, and in terms of genuine battle prowess, he would be able to kill the other man single-handedly. Depending on external power, even if the other party won, what would be the point? You can indeed borrow power now, but would you be able to keep borrowing it? Is it guaranteed that you could do it in every corner of the celestial realm? Can you guarantee that you can still do the same in Celestial King tier? That Ling Han was not going to believe. This borrowed power did not come from the heaven and earth, but from some powerful existence, such as a ninth heaven celestial king. But a ninth heaven celestial king was not omnipotent. For example, if a ninth heaven celestial king wanted to borrow power, how was he going to borrow it? Compared to this kind of thing, Ling Han was more trusting of his own strength. Chapter 2018. Beast Tide. Lan Tianyu had achieved his purpose in this battle. With loud laughter he strode off. Young Master Ling, don't take it to heart. Firstly, fourth uncle's cultivation level is above yours, and secondly, you have not been blessed by the deity yet. Otherwise you, too, would be able to borrow power from the deity, and you would definitely not be weaker to fourth uncle then, Lan Ruaji comforted. Ling Han naturally wouldn't take it to heart. If it was a life-or-death battle, he could guarantee that the person that would die would definitely be Lan Tianyu. However, there was no need to say these words. Firstly, Lan Ruaji would think that he was a sore loser, and secondly, he had no wish to reveal his trump card anyway. Young Master Ling, let us go and prepare the ceremony to offer sacrifices. Who knows, my father may also appreciate your natural talent, and perhaps will wish to take you as a disciple, Lan Ruaji said, seemingly thinking that Ling Han could no longer escape from her gentle trap. Ling Han's heart moved, and he asked, what cultivation level is the Lord Island Master at? Lan Ruaji hesitated slightly, but still answered, Father is equivalent to an Ascending Origin Tier Elite. Ascending Origin Tier. Ling Han nodded internally. The strength of this island was extraordinary. If this was in the Eastern Celestial Realm, this would be a genuine 4-star force, which was considerably powerful. Led by Lan Ruaji, Ling Han arrived in a room inside the ancient castle. Those like Qin Wei and his group were all here. Everyone was waiting. They had to first bathe and burn joss sticks, and only after a whole 3 days would they be able to officially enter under the banner of that deity. Ling Han got familiar with the sequence of events. In this process, he would have to offer a sliver of his spirit respectfully to that deity. It was just a little bit, and would definitely not have any effect on him personally. But this was something that Ling Han definitely couldn't accept. Firstly, to cultivate to the highest cultivation level, the spirit had to maintain the state of an absolute whole. Secondly, there were a great many evil techniques in this world that depended on the use of blood and spirit to cast. To split out a portion of his spirit to be given to another was equivalent to placing his own life in the hands of another. How could that be condoned? As expected, the so-called teaching the technique to all and the so-called deity were all false. How could there be any free lunch in this world? But looking at Qin Wei and the rest, they all looked completely unconcerned. Their yearning for further improvement of their strength had already surpassed all else. For them, to say nothing of Celestial King tier in this life, they might not be able to reach even Ascending Origin tier and Immortal Palace tier. Then why should they be concerned about how complete their spirit was? As for having their lives being under the control of another, that was something that they had not thought of at all. At present, their minds were filled with thoughts of having a chance to improve their strength without expending any effort. Everyone, are you all really going to believe that there would be such a good thing in this world? Taking advantage of the fact that they were the only ones sitting quietly here, Ling Han spoke up. He had no intention to save these people, and merely wanted to cause trouble for the ancient castle's side. Ling Han, what do you mean? Someone immediately jumped up. Could it be that you wish to enjoy the blessing of the deity alone? Ling Han was stunned. His intentions had actually been misinterpreted thus. You are already a monarch tier, and can be considered invincible in your cultivation level. Even if we were blessed by the deity, we cannot possibly become stronger than you. So why do you have to envy us? That's right. I hate people like you that cannot bear to see others benefit. And you call yourself a monarch tier with that kind of limited tolerance? Hey! Because Qin Wei was seated there, they were not the slightest bit reserved with their words. In any case, they would be having the deity as their powerful backer in the future. So what did Ling Han being a monarch tier, or becoming a celestial king, have to do with them? Without need, they naturally could hold their heads high in front of Ling Han. This seemed to have ignited the passion of the masses. They began to spout out words of crusading against Ling Han all at once, as if Ling Han had done some heinous deed. Every half an hour, someone would come in to add another joss stick, and when the time came for the next edition, someone quietly pulled the person who was adding the joss stick aside, and said something quietly to him. The person left, and Xiao Jun appeared only after a while, beckoning towards Ling Han as he said, "Brother Ling, please come with me for a word." Ling Han was sure that he had been told on. He was curious to see what the other would do. He stood up, and walked outside by Xiao Jun's side. "Brother Ling, do you still have some doubts regarding the deity that we believe in?" Xiao Jun asked calmly. "Of course not." Ling Han pushed the blame off himself cleanly. "But someone has told me that Brother Ling's resolution does not seem to be very firm," Xiao Jun said smilingly. "Would Brother Xiao believe me, or choose to believe a piece of trash?" Ling Han countered with his own question. Xiao Jun couldn't help but pause quietly. After a while he suddenly laughed loudly, and said, "I naturally believe Brother Ling." Ling Han only smiled slightly. Who cared if Xiao Jun believed or not? In any case, when the time came, Ling Han would definitely cause great trouble, and then duck into the Black Tower to take refuge. An Ascending Origin tier elite would not be able to do anything to the Black Tower, and what he had to take care about was only to avoid being killed before he successfully hid in the Black Tower. Boom! Just at this moment, the whole island shook with a tremor, as if an earthquake had taken place. Xiao Jun was at a loss at first, which was quickly followed by a shocked expression. "Oh no, the beast tide has come in assault. Woo!" Just at this moment, the strange sound of a horn rang out. Immediately, the whole ancient castle was alerted. "All of you come out, the beast tide is here." Xiao Jun shot quickly into the meditation chamber, calling out to the masses. "What beast tide? Are there any beast tides on the boundless seas? I never heard about this." Everyone exchanged looks, all appearing to be very confused and completely blank. "Speak less rubbish and come out quickly." Yet Xiao Jun called out harshly. This kind of attitude involuntarily caused a considerable number of people to feel displeased. Previously, he had repeatedly addressed them as respected guests, allowing them to enjoy fully the royal treatment, yet now his attitude had changed completely, and he kept shouting at them. This change was really too massive. Ling Han sneered internally. The reason why the ancient castle's people had been so courteous was merely because they wanted them to switch to cultivating the other system of cultivation, and before achieving their motive, they would naturally be incredibly cordial. However, the appearance of this beast tide seemed to have disrupted their plans. "If we cannot beat the beast tide, all of us will be dead." Xiao Jun continued. These words were filled with impact. Everyone hurriedly jumped up and quickly ran outside. Xiao Jun suddenly turned his head and solemnly said to Ling Han, "Brother Ling, please give your all." Ling Han smiled and said, "We are in the same boat. We naturally should be working together." "All right." The two of them were the last to walk out. When they walked out of the ancient castle, they saw that the people of the ancient castle had all moved out and were going towards the west. 3 sides of Ascent Route Island end in a steep cliff, where killing formations are placed. The beast tide cannot charge upwards along cliffs, and can only bulldoze from the western coast, Xiao Jun explained. His figure turned into a wisp of mist, moving along with the crowds. Ling Han followed behind him, yet his mind was beginning to wander. Since they could lay out killing formations on 3 sides, why couldn't they do the same for all 4 directions? It was highly possible that they had walled 3 sides while allowing the last side to be open on purpose, so that those who had encountered sea perils and drifted here could set foot on the island, and allow them to propagate their deity. Furthermore, Qin Wei and the others had previously felt curious why there would be a beast tide on the seas. These people had always traveled on the boundless seas, so they should have considerable experience, but even they had never known the fact that there would be beast tides on the seas. Why would it happen on this tiny island then? Just exactly what secrets were hidden on this small island? Ling Han suddenly became extremely curious. Chapter 2019. Firm Essence Green Gold. As Ling Han's thoughts whirled, he arrived on the western coast of the island. The moment he arrived, he was immediately stunned by the scene that met his eyes. This was too grandiose. Marine creatures that numbered in the tens of thousands were presently surging towards the island. Some were already closely approaching, and were presently launching a fierce offensive. For example, a walrus that was 3,000 meters tall was presently using its gigantic body to crash into the island. Only a single collision, and the whole island would tremble, as if it was about to be fragmented by the crash. Or another example. A massive lobster was using its twin pincers to send out slashes onto the coast. Multiple seals of Dao covered its pincers, shining brilliantly. However, the island had also long since set up the first line of defense, stopping these marine creatures from invading further. Furthermore, though there were a great many marine creatures, and they were very big, their quality was quite unevenly spread out, and only a few rare ones were really strong. Thus, strictly speaking, they had only come to deliver themselves to death. A resident of the island sent out a punch, and a black-colored flame blazed. One punch was capable of insta-killing 10 marine creatures. Another waved a sword in a slash, and again black-colored sword chi filled the skies. Blood spurted in all directions, and masses of marine creatures collapsed. There were also powerful marine creatures among the tide, like a golden yellow frog. As it opened its mouth, it would send out golden light that turned into golden arrows. Xiao, 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 wherever it landed, it would immediately cause a great many island residents to suffer severe injury. "Let me!" A loud shout rang out, and Lan Tianyu charged out, blocking this giant frog, and they both began an intense battle. And there were fierce battles taking place everywhere on this western coast. There was a very large gap in strength among the marine creatures, but there was no shortage of elites among them. There was an immortal palace tear clam that created a terrifying hurricane capable of destroying everything as it opened and closed its shell. There was also a 6-legged green crocodile that spat out seals capable of shaking the heavens and shattering the ground from its mouth. Intense battles were happening everywhere. No one could slack off, and what was more frightening was that there were endless marine creatures that were presently surging over from the depths of the seas. It was just like the people on this island had killed their king, or their prince, and they were now here to get revenge at all costs. Merely a day had passed, and the coast of the island was already covered with corpses. Blood had dyed the waters of the surrounding area red. However, those that had died were basically all the marine creatures, and the casualties on the side of the humans were still 0. But those like Qin Wei and the others were already running out of origin power. Furthermore, they were continuously drawing on the power of regulation. Their spirits were also weary and battered, and their battle prowess could possibly drop from the peak to rock bottom at any moment. The exertion in the battle was too harsh. Otherwise, with the accumulation of origin power that a celestial had, they could at least continue fighting for more than half a year's time. Just think of how they had previously encountered the giant tsunami, And one would know. It had only been several hundred waves, and the formations had sucked all of them dry, causing them to collapse in fatigue. On the other hand, those on the ancient castle side were all still looking very energetic, and there was completely no display of weariness. This was the amazing trait of the other system of cultivation, or was it a benefit of believing in that deity? Power of sacrifice. Small Tower suddenly spoke up. Sacrifice? Ling Han frowned. He had naturally heard of the matter of sacrifice. For example, if some place was too violent and inauspicious, then a sacrifice could possibly remove the inauspiciousness. In the ancient realm, the Eternity Sky Emperor had also organized a large-scale sacrifice for the sake of obtaining the Nine Demons' Sword so that the murderous aura of the Nine Demons' Sword could be removed. This place was also preparing a sacrifice. While what was being sacrificed was naturally these marine creatures, what was the sacrifice meant for? Small Tower did not speak further. Instead, it channeled the Black Tower. Instantly, a majestic power surged up, actually causing all the marine creatures to tremble and cease their attacks at the same time. In the boundless sea, practically all the living creatures had not gained intelligence, and they were all in the primal state. But the more primitive they were, the more sensitive these marine creatures were to powerful beings. For them, the Black Tower was a supreme existence. However, it was only a mere instant, and when the power of the Black Tower surged over, the marine creatures regained their ferocity and began to launch a fierce offensive once more. Brat, while you are a bringer of calamity, your luck seems to be extraordinarily good. Small Tower spoke again. Are you praising me, commending me, or complimenting me? Ling Han asked with a grin. Your skin is really quite thick. Hee. Small Tower paused and continued. There is a source power of heaven and earth beneath this island. What? Ling Han got a shock. Really? He naturally would not suspect Small Tower. While this guy was at Sundra, there seemed to have never been any previous instance in which it had been joking, and would never use this kind of matter to deceive him. What type is it? He asked quickly. Metal element, Small Tower said. Firm essence green gold. Metal element. Ling Han's heart involuntarily jolted. He already had 3 source powers of heaven and earth, and they were water, fire, and wood, and now if he could gain another metal element source power of heaven and earth, he would be one step closer to having 9 source powers of heaven and earth to complete his dividing soul tier. Hold on, you were speaking about sacrifice just now. Could it be that sacrifice is for the sake of retrieving the firm essence green gold? The nature of metal element is violent and murderous, so to retrieve this source power of heaven and earth, you would have to first remove the air of violence of the firm essence green gold. Otherwise, this would be equivalent to having a celestial king blast his aura madly. Not even ascending origin tier could stand against that. Moreover, the people on the seas have never heard of beast tides, but it has suddenly broken out here. This means this beast tide is possibly artificially engineered for the purpose of obtaining enough materials for sacrifice. Though it has not been proven yet, if there really was a source power of heaven and earth here, and a metal element one at that, then there is a 99% chance that this deduction is not wrong. Ling Han stopped his thoughts from wandering, and asked Small Tower, then has this source power of heaven and earth reached a time it can be retrieved? Almost, Small Tower said. This kind of sacrifice would have to continue for at least over 1,000,000 years. Only then would the sharp air of violence drop to rock bottom. It could possibly be this time, it could also possibly need another 2 to 3 times, and only then could it be retrieved. However, success would still have to depend on fortune. Removing the air of violence was only the first step. Winning won the opportunity to show his face in front of the source power of heaven and earth, but it did not represent completely that it could be retrieved by then. However, without the opportunity to show one's face, there was even less possibility of retrieving it. Lan Ruaji said that they had only been on this island for several million years. Then, it is highly possible that they were the first to discover that this place houses the firm essence green gold, and that was why they settled down here. And then, through a great many years of study, they came up with this method of sacrifice. Though I still have not met that island master, but judging from his actions, he should be a smart man who plans before he moves. Furthermore, this alternate system of cultivation may have some other strange factor to it that could allow him to retrieve the source power of heaven and earth. I had already planned to cause a great disturbance. If I could ruin the plans of that island master for retrieving the firm essence green gold, or even if I myself could retrieve it, that would not be too bad. Ling Han's eyes lit up. He could not possibly stop this sacrificial rite. Though dividing soul tier monarch tiers were indeed very strong, against an immortal palace tier, there was still no way he could match the opponent, what more when there were also ascending origin tier elites on the other side too. Even if he took out the poisonous fruit of the red-spotted green bamboo, he would still be unable to succeed. Then why not just add fuel to the fire, and he himself could retrieve this source power of heaven and earth? That was what he had decided on doing. Ling Han roared, and was just planning to push his battle prowess to full throttle when he saw a man suddenly leap over, and directly send a sword slash in his direction. Die! Chapter 2020. Rival in Love. Ling Han had a great many enemies, but to have someone he had never even seen before suddenly deliver a fatal attack against him made him feel extremely curious. He casually sent out a kick, and with a ding, that sneak attacker's sword flew out of his grip. That was a pretty boy, his skin so fine that it could induce envy in a great many women. His appearance was also considerably handsome. However, he was a little weak, and could only be at fourth severance at most. Ling Han's expression was calm as he asked, "Why did you want to kill me?" "You are my rival in love, so isn't it reasonable that I want to kill you?" that pretty boy countered, his head raised high. Rival in love? Ling Han was surprised. When did he have such a rival in love like this? "Hold on, Lan Ruaji." He couldn't help but shake his head, and said, "I think you have misunderstood." "Really?" That pretty boy made no further move, and took 2 steps forwards. "You really won't try to contest with me over Ruaji?" When he uttered the last word, he suddenly moved again, his right hand forming claws as he mercilessly delivered a claw strike at Ling Han's chest. This brat was really sly. Ling Han sent out another kick, landing solidly between the legs of that pretty boy. Ow! The pretty boy immediately released a pained yowl, his body involuntarily crumbling. His hands covered his crotch as layers of cold sweat flowed down his forehead. "I really could not tell that a person that looked so fair would be so black-hearted," Ling Han said. The pretty boy was already incapable of speech. This kick was not just strong in force, but also contained a sliver of regulations of heaven and earth. To Ling Han, this was just a sliver, but to a fourth severance, this tiny sliver was already earth-shattering. Veins popped on the pretty boy's forehead, and after a while he finally said, "It's you who are too stupid." "I'm stupid?" Ling Han shook his head, and then sent out a punch. Pa! The pretty boy was instantly turned into a shower of blood from the blow. Since he had made a move on him, then he should have prepared himself to be killed in return. Xiao, 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 Xiao. Another 7 people pounced out, charging towards Ling Han. Die! Though the 7 of them did not look the same, they all had one shared trait, and that was that they all looked especially handsome. Furthermore, they were all fair and smooth in complexion, every single one of them pretty boys. Fuck, these shouldn't all be Lan Ruaji's lovers, right? Ling Han felt disgust rise up in his heart. Just what kind of **** conflict had he gotten himself involved in? Moreover, these lovers were a little too merciless, weren't they? They hadn't even truly met yet, and they were already wanting to kill him. Ling Han shook his head, sending out a punch. Fiery flames blazed, and instantly turned the 7 of them into dust. This also intimidated the others, and they did not dare pounce over again. They were indeed Lan Ruaji's lovers, and in Lan Ruaji's harem, her lovers were allowed to attack each other fatally. This was a kind of pleasure in Lan Ruaji's eyes, as she delighted in how her lovers would fly into a rage out of jealousy in front of her while they attacked each other violently in secret. If that hadn't been the case, the number of her lovers would have long since exceeded 100 instead of merely these dozen and some at present. Afterwards, this had become a custom. Every time there would be a new entry, all her lovers would work together to deal with him. If they could kill him, they would have one less competitor for her affections. However, this time, they had clearly met their match. Ling Han was indescribably strong. This was really disgusting. Ling Han mocked endlessly. He had not thought that he had just said a few words to Lan Ruaji, and he was already embroiled in this kind of farce. If this spread out, he would definitely be laughed at and ridiculed. To think that he would actually be striving for favor with a bunch of pretty boys. Fuck! Ling Han's figure charged out, his battle prowess on full throttle. The 9 heavens flame-divided soul had also been brought into play. Fiery flames blazed, sword-chi soared, and the rate of slaughter was astonishingly high. The marine creatures' attacks came in wave after wave, as if there was no end to it. To say nothing of the others, even Ling Han himself could feel a weariness rise up in him. Next shift. An austere voice rang out, and a new batch of people came out from the ancient castle, switching shifts with the people who were already fully expended from the battle, and continuing to battle fiercely with the marine creatures. Once everyone retreated, they collapsed onto the ground, feeling an incredible soreness in every single bone of their bodies. Ling Han also took advantage of the time to recover his origin power. He had cultivated every cultivation level to complete perfection, so he had a continuous supply of power, was far more capable of exertion than the others in the same cultivation level, and his recovery rate was also much faster. 3 days later, they had another change of shift. Qin Wei and the others were incredibly gloomy. They had not enjoyed any benefits yet, but already had to work hard. But if they didn't, it wouldn't do, either. Once these marine creatures broke through the lines of defense, all of them would be dead. This was like a war that had no end. Every marine creature was fearless of death, and tried its best to barrage against the lines of defense of the island, and the island residents were also putting their all into resistance, causing Ascent Route Island to become a slaughterhouse. What reassured Qin Wei and the rest was that, at least up to the present, there were only injuries, and no deaths. This was very inconceivable. Under such a powerful offensive, there were actually no deaths on their side. At first, Ling Han had not noticed, but he soon discovered this fact. Thus, he placed his attention on the others as well, and realized that it was not they that were lucky, but that when someone encountered a deadly danger, those marine creatures would die for some inconceivable reason. In such chaotic battles, this was not very obvious, but as long as one paid attention, he would definitely realize this. Ling Han couldn't help but turn and look in the direction of the ancient castle. So far, that mysterious island master still had not appeared. Perhaps it was he that was interfering from the shadows, and thus ensured that no one died. An ascending origin tier elite absolutely had that kind of ability. Why did he have to save them then? Very simple. Every single person here was a student of the alternate cultivation system, and would spread it out, so how could they be easily sacrificed? The alternate system of cultivation would cause damage to the regulations of the heaven and earth, and would be strictly forbidden by all forces. When it was taught, it had to be done secretly, and thus was in more dire need of manpower. On one side, that island master needed people to help him prepare the sacrifice, slaughtering marine creatures, and on another, he also had to protect the people here so that they could spread out that new cultivation system, and that was what led to the present situation. Linking all the cause and effect of the situation together, Ling Han thought that his deduction could explain everything very well, so he was sure that his deduction was correct. "Why is the beast tide so fierce this time?" a native complained. "That's right. In the past, it would last 2 to 3 days at most, but this time, it's already been close to 10 days. If this goes on, everyone won't be able to hold on much longer. Why hasn't Lord Island Master appeared yet? With him changing the flow of the tides, we should be able to win easily." Yet Ling Han understood why in his mind. That Island Master had to be managing the ceremony for the sacrifice. Perhaps he did not trust any other person, so he did not even participate in the battles, and would only occasionally emerge to save someone. Since the time period of the beast tide this time has exceeded previous times, and Small Tower has also said that removing the murderous aura of the firm essence green gold would also need another 2 to 3 rounds of sacrifices, then it is very possible that that Island Master wants to succeed with this one time, and that was why he has extended the time period for the beast tide. Hee, looks like I too should make my move. Chapter 2021. Searching for firm essence green gold. Ling Han didn't know how the people on the island had triggered the beast tide. However, since they could trigger it, they could naturally cause it to continue. This didn't worry Ling Han. Right now, he was simply concerned with how to obtain that source power of heaven and earth. The battle continued, and the sea creatures continued to surge forth. They had complete disregard for their own life and death, and they simply yearned to break through the defenses. 10 days, 15 days. On the 17th day, Ling Han suddenly felt the pressure easing. The beast tide is weakening. There are no new sea creatures charging over. It's finally about to end. We've finally held them back. Everyone faltered for a moment before feeling a rush of delight. Even though they were exhausted, it was a miracle that not a single one of them had been killed during the intense battle. We're being protected by a deity, someone immediately said with a devout expression. Their words resonated with everyone else, and they all nodded in agreement. After annihilating the final wave of the beast tide, they all kneeled down to pray toward the ancient castle. Qin Wei and the others exchanged a glance. Even though they hadn't enjoyed a buff from the deity, it was true that not a single one of them had died during the battle. As such, how could they not regard this as a miracle? Several of them immediately kneeled down in prayer. Meanwhile, several of them remained standing. They hadn't obtained any benefits, and they had instead fought a battle for the sake of others first. That being the case, they naturally couldn't bring themselves to kneel down. Ling Han silently stepped back. The retreat of the beast tide also signified that the sacrificial offering was nearing its end. It was time to collect that source power of heaven and earth. Small tower, lead the way. He arrived behind a huge boulder, where he directly broke through the ground, and tunneled into the earth. The firm essence green gold was buried deep beneath the ground. If Ling Han had practiced the regulations of earth, he wouldn't have needed to tunnel through the earth in such a crude manner. By channeling the Tao of earth, tunneling through the ground would have been like soaring through the sky. Now, however, he had no choice but to use this crude method to forge a path. Fortunately, his physique was tough enough, and his power was also strong enough. As he tunneled down, the stone and earth before him were much like water. They would affect his speed, but not to a significant degree. Small Tower pointed out the correct path, and Ling Han followed its guidance. After descending thousands of meters underground, he finally started to feel some resistance. The earth had become firmer, and it was incredibly hard and tough. Rather than being composed of dirt and stone, it was as if it had been forged from divine metal. A thought occurred to Ling Han. By the looks of it, he was most likely nearing the firm essence green gold. Under the influence of this source power of heaven and earth, even the surrounding terrain had become as stiff as metal. Then under the influence of the firm essence green gold, might this dirt have transformed into genuine metal? Or even godly metal? Ling Han immediately drew his divine demon sword. First of all, he wanted to see whether his divine demon sword could absorb the metallic element contained within the earth. Second of all, wielding the divine demon sword would allow him to travel at a quicker speed. In terms of destructive ability alone, the divine demon sword was superior to him. With this hope in his mind, the divine demon sword immediately thrust forward. Wang! The pseudo-celestial sword shuddered slightly. At the same time, the surrounding earth started to dazzle, glowing at times and dimming at others. It was as if the earth were breathing. My speculation was right. Ling Han faltered upon seeing this. He was then overcome with delight. The earth in this region had all transformed into godly metal. Moreover, it might have even reached the level of pseudo-divine metal. It was because of this that he found it increasingly difficult to advance. To the divine demon sword, however, this was a delectable feast. This is incredible. Ling Han wielded his sword and continued forward, allowing it to absorb the godly metal to its heart's content. In fact, he was advancing at an even slower speed than before. Even though the divine demon sword had a huge appetite, it still needed time to digest what it had absorbed. However, Ling Han wasn't impatient at all. After all, this kind of opportunity was far too rare. The formation of a source power of heaven and earth would require heaven knew how many hundreds of millions of years. In fact, it might even take several epochs. During the process of its formation, it would naturally affect the surrounding environment as well. Thus, transforming the surrounding earth into godly metal was, in fact, very understandable and normal. Anyhow, Ling Han had come across it, and he had truly struck gold. After descending a further few thousand meters, Ling Han started to feel an aura of violence and murder. In fact, this wasn't simply a feeling. Rather, he could also see it with his eyes. After breaking through the stone and earth, he could see streaks of air currents flowing through the surroundings. They were like swords and sabers, and even Ling Han's physique wasn't tough enough to withstand their power. They could easily breach his physique and draw blood. This was the violent aura of the Tao of metal. It was brimming with devastating destructive power. Ling Han tried to carefully avoid these air currents, yet this was an incredibly difficult task. The streaks of air currents had no pattern to their movements, and they continued to cut through the surroundings in a chaotic and unpredictable fashion. Moreover, their speed was incredible, and they could breach Ling Han's defenses before he even noticed their approach. At some point in time, Ling Han raised his divine demon sword to parry their attacks. To his surprise, he discovered that the divine demon sword could even absorb this kind of murderous aura. He came to a sudden realization. The divine demon sword wasn't absorbing metal itself, and it was instead absorbing the regulations of metal. It was because of this that metal would be reduced to smithereens after being engulfed by it. Since this murderous aura also contained the regulation of metal, it could naturally be absorbed by the divine demon sword as well. Interesting. A smile spread across Ling Han's face as he advanced with sword in hand. He cut aside all obstacles, and he advanced with no trouble at all. After an hour or so, the divine demon sword suddenly stopped absorbing the surrounding regulations of metal. Its blade started to quiver slightly, and several symbols of the Great Tao started to materialize around it. However, they immediately shattered again, only to be replaced by new symbols of the Great Tao. These symbols were far more complex, and they were also far more complete. It was advancing. 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. If a cultivator wanted to advance, they would need to make countless preparations. Moreover, they would also need to face heavenly tribulation and whatnot. However, the divine demon sword had advanced in an instant. This was because there was only a single level above that of godly metal to the divine demon sword. It was divine metal. The notion of 1-star pseudo-divine metal, 2-star pseudo-divine metal, and so on were all divisions created by humans. In reality, nature didn't differentiate pseudo-divine metal in such a manner. As such, the divine demon sword had only taken a small step forward by reaching the level of 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. Ling Han continued forward. Following the advance of the divine demon sword, its engulfing ability became even more astonishing. Previously, it had only been able to engulf the metallic essence in the nearby 30 meters. Now, however, this range had expanded to 60 meters. Wherever the divine demon sword passed, there wouldn't be a single iota of regulation of metal remaining. Small tower, what exactly is devouring metal? Ling Han couldn't help but ask. Divine metal. Moreover, there's a sliver of chance that it can surpass all divine metal in the future, becoming a peerless existence, Small Tower replied in a calm voice. So you're saying that it can engulf divine metal and continue to advance? Finally, you're not stupid beyond saving, Small Tower said. It was clearly praising him, yet Ling Han couldn't feel joy no matter what. How extravagant. Divine metal. Even celestial kings couldn't necessarily obtain such a matter to forge a celestial tool. However, the divine demon sword needed to be nurtured by divine metal such that it could continue to grow. Absorbing divine metal to grow. Even retards would understand the freakish nature of this. Ling Han couldn't help but yearn for that time. When he became a celestial king, no, a high-level celestial king, he could perhaps give this a try. If he could truly obtain a transcendent celestial tool, wouldn't that be fun? Ling Han chuckled to himself. He was getting way too ahead of himself. The first step was to transform the divine demon sword into a genuine celestial tool. Ling Han, you're not celebrating with everyone else, and you're instead wandering around here by yourself. Perhaps you're doing something shameful? Someone sneered in a cold voice. A person suddenly appeared behind him. Lan Tianyu. Chapter 2022. Battle with Lan Tianyu. Lan Tianyu's black hair was flowing and untied, and this gave him the charisma of an unrestrained and wild individual. Lan Tianyu, Ling Han said with a nod. He sheathed his sword as he turned around to face this powerful opponent. Lan Tianyu cracked a smile and said, I heard Xiao Jun say that you tried to lead others astray in the resting room. At that time, I already realized that you were unreliable, so I decided to keep an eye on you. Sure enough, I discovered that you immediately vanished after the battle. After looking around for a while, I've finally found you again. So what? Ling Han asked in a calm voice. Since he had been discovered, they would simply resolve this with a battle. Was he afraid? I knew that a person like you couldn't possibly be subdued. You simply put up a show so you could save your own skin. However, I'm truly very curious. Why have you suddenly decided to tunnel underground? Perhaps you discovered something? Lan Tianyu asked in curiosity. Ling Han smiled and said, "Oh? There's something underground? Perhaps this is some secret?" Lan Tianyu stared at Ling Han for a moment before saying, "Even though I find this hard to believe, I have to concede that a person like you won't do something for no good reason. So, you definitely discovered something, am I correct?" "Discovered something?" Ling Han replied with a faint smile. Lan Tianyu was trying to pry information from Ling Han. He wanted to see if Ling Han had truly discovered the source power of heaven and earth that was hidden underground. If he had discovered it, then it was extremely likely that he wasn't acting alone. Instead, he was most likely being supported by some powerful figure. If that were the case, then they definitely couldn't let their guard down. To say nothing of the fact that their island master was only at the ascending origin tier, above which there was still the celestial king tier. What would it matter even if their island master were at the celestial king tier? They were like pests of heaven and earth, pests that were hunted and despised by everyone. "There's a source power of heaven and earth here," Lan Tianyu said slowly. He stared at Ling Han as he said this, examining the minute changes in his expression. However, Ling Han remained calm and composed, and he said, "I'm also very curious. Your elder brother is at the ascending origin tier, so why are you such a disappointment? How are you only at the dividing soul tier?" Lan Tianyu humphed and said, "My progress is slow because I'm reaching the level of perfection for each cultivation level. When I advance to the 9th lotus, which is equivalent to the ascending origin tier, I'll be invincible among those at my cultivation level." Ling Han couldn't help but bend down in laughter. "Say, can you stop being so self-confident? Your aptitude is indeed slightly stronger than that of those at the king tier. You can just barely be considered as an emperor tier. However, once you can't draw on external power, what right will you have to stand here and say that you're invincible among those at the same cultivation level? Trash like you then is abundant in the eastern and western celestial realm." This was naturally an exaggeration. To say nothing of emperor tiers, even king tiers were rare in the two celestial realms. However, as a top-tier monarch tier, Ling Han often came across fellow prodigies at the same level. As such, he naturally felt like such prodigies were abundant in number. Lan Tianyu exploded in rage upon hearing this. He stared daggers at Ling Han, and a strong killing intent exuded from his body. He had always been proud of his talent and aptitude, and he thought nothing of all other prodigies. It was because he was stuck in this place that he hadn't been able to make a name for himself. Now, however, Ling Han actually dared to belittle his talent. He couldn't endure this. He definitely couldn't endure this. "You actually dare to question my talent?" he asked in rage. Ling Han scoffed and said, "Right now, I'm at the late stage of Yang Soul. What cultivation level are you at? Not only that, but even after drawing on the power of the **TTY deity or whatnot, you're still unable to defeat me. What right do you have to mention the words talent before me?" Lan Tianyu was rendered speechless. His cultivation level was equivalent to the peak stage of Yin Soul. However, without the power of the deity, his battle prowess would only be invincible among those at Earth Soul. It was still some way off from reaching Heaven Soul. Compared to Ling Han, he was indeed far inferior. Ling Han was truly a prodigy. Moreover, he was far more talented than Lan Tianyu. This caused the latter to feel wild with jealousy. Since he was inferior, he would simply kill Ling Han. That way, there would be no one who was more prodigious than him. "I initially planned to spare you. However, you're seeking death yourself," Lan Tianyu said in a baleful voice. Ling Han roared with laughter as he brandished his divine demon sword. "Then come battle." With a flash, he charged at Lan Tianyu. During their previous battle, Lan Tianyu had enjoyed a small advantage. This wasn't because Ling Han was weaker, but it was because the latter hadn't wanted to unleash his trump cards. However, a battle to the death was different. He would unleash his full power to annihilate his opponent. Most importantly, the divine demon sword had advanced to the level of 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. This was equivalent to reaching Heaven's Soul. Whoosh! With a single slash, space was severed and clouds were obliterated. The surrounding earth was instantly shattered into nothingness. Lan Tianyu was astonished. Ling Han's cultivation was clearly unchanged, yet his battle prowess had surprisingly become several times more powerful. This was simply inconceivable. It was that sword. A mere sword can actually elevate your battle prowess by so much? How astonishing! Lan Tianyu's feeling of jealousy became even stronger. His opponent was more talented than him, and he even possessed a peerless divine sword. "It's mine," he roared. Boom! He became enveloped in a black aura, and a black lotus with 7 petals also materialized between his brows. He immediately launched a counterattack. Boom! Ling Han's sword slashed down, and Lan Tianyu was instantly sent flying, crashing into the wall with a thundering boom. This collision sent him flying back, and he couldn't help but shudder due to the forceful impact. He felt as uncomfortable as could be. At this moment, Ling Han had already caught up, and he immediately launched another slash. Lan Tianyu had no time to feel astonished, and he could only spit a burst of black air with a loud roar. This burst of air transformed into a violent column of flames, amid which a black symbol was materializing. This wasn't a symbol of the Great Tao. Ling Han was certain of this. After all, this symbol was completely different from the Great Tao of heaven and earth that he understood. If this had been a symbol of the Great Tao, it would have intertwined and resonated with the regulations of heaven and earth. Hang on! Ling Han could sense mysterious power traveling over from above them, from the direction of the ancient castle. This power was fusing together with the black symbol, causing it to become more powerful. Boom! The black symbol smashed over with terrifying power. Ling Han sneered upon seeing this. He then clenched his fists and replied with a punch. Boom! The shock wave of the collision caused the newly created cave to shudder violently, with stone debris and dust raining down. It was as if the cave were about to collapse at any moment. Haha! Your strength is only a... Watch how I behead you! Lan Tianyu said with a loud laugh. Without his divine sword, Ling Han's battle prowess was no different from before. Since he had been able to enjoy an advantage before, he could naturally replicate the same feat again. Is that so? Ling Han said. He launched a flurry of punches, showing no signs of shirking from Lan Tianyu's attacks. He would face his attacks head-on. He still needed to obtain the source power of heaven and earth, so he had no time to waste here. That being the case, he would end this battle as quickly as possible. He would end the life of his opponent. You're seeking death, Lan Tianyu said with a cold sneer. He was enjoying the protection of a deity, so his defenses were as powerful as could be. As such, facing him head-on would be nothing more than seeking death. I hope you can remain stubborn until the very end, Ling Han said with a smile. Pang, pang, pang. They exchanged a flurry of punches in quick succession. Lan Tianyu couldn't help but feel shocked. This was because his bones were already creaking under stress. However, Ling Han was still completely unscathed. How is this possible? Why, you're wearing some kind of protective armor, Lan Tianyu exclaimed. He didn't dare to face Ling Han head-on anymore. In his mind, there was only a single answer to Ling Han's defenses being stronger than his. Ling Han scoffed upon hearing this, and he couldn't be bothered explaining. Instead, he summoned his 9 heavens flame divided soul. Normally, this divided soul would comprehend the great Tao under the reincarnation tree, allowing Ling Han to continually improve his cultivation. At this moment, Ling Han unleashed his heaven-destroying 9 swords, while his divided soul was bathed in flames as it scorched heaven and earth with the 9 heavens flame. Chapter 2023. Bottom of the Cave. Lan Tianyu's situation became increasingly dire. He was indeed very powerful, especially with the aid of the deity. Both his offensive and defensive power were elevated by a significant amount. However, in terms of offensive power, Ling Han had both the divine demon sword and the 9 heavens flame, a source power of heaven and earth. Meanwhile, in terms of defensive power, who in the dividing soul tier could rival Ling Han? During their previous battle, Ling Han had barely revealed any of his power. Now, however, he was unleashing his full power, so Lan Tianyu was naturally under immense pressure. How could there be so many monarch tiers in the world? Lan Tianyu was only a monarch tier in name, but not in reality. Humph! Lan Tianyu gritted his teeth and turned around to flee. He couldn't defeat Ling Han, so he naturally had no choice but to flee. Since I'm unleashing my full power, do you really think you can escape? Ling Han said with a cold chuckle. Like a bolt of lightning, he immediately flashed before Lan Tianyu, blocking his path of retreat. Detestable! Lan Tianyu roared. He unleashed a wave of attacks, yet he was unable to breach Ling Han's defense no matter what. That being the case, he had no choice but to continue his battle with Ling Han. His mind was filled with shock. Even though he could still barely rival Ling Han at this moment, he definitely couldn't hold on for much longer. After all, the divine demon sword was far too terrifying, and the Nine Heavens flame was far too devastating. No, he definitely had to flee. He had to report this to his older brother. The ship crew had told him that Ling Han hadn't come here with them. Instead, they had rescued him during their journey. In such a vast sea, just what were the chances of this happening? Thus, Ling Han was definitely here with a plan, and he was definitely hiding his identity while mingling with these people. There was definitely a powerful figure standing behind him. As such, he couldn't underestimate Ling Han. However, Lan Tianyu clearly hadn't considered the unbelievably low chances of encountering a giant storm at sea and being pushed to this island. In any case, he was fully convinced about his own belief. To Ling Han, however, Lan Tianyu's speculations didn't matter at all. After all, the other man was going to be a dead person soon. Meanwhile, Lan Tianyu felt immeasurable regret. After discovering Ling Han's disappearance, he hadn't told anyone else, and he had simply started to search for Ling Han himself. This was because, in his mind, Ling Han was definitely no match for him. That being the case, would he need to inform anyone else? To his shock, however, Ling Han actually possessed so many trump cards. Not only did he possess a peerless sword, but he could even unleash such devastating flames as a dividing soul tier cultivator. This was utterly petrifying. Lan Tianyu finally reached a resolution in his mind. He would unleash his full power and disregard his safety in an attempt to flee. However, each time he succeeded in fleeing, Ling Han would quickly catch up again. At that time, he would be plunged into a perilous situation again. Moreover, the cost of breaking free was suffering several bloody gashes in his body, and having his bones broken and his flesh burned by terrifying fists of flames. If they had been closer to the surface of the ground, he could have broken free even if it meant suffering severe wounds. Now, however, they were far too deep underground. This caused him to be overcome with despair. There was simply no way for him to escape. If you dare to kill me, you won't be able to survive either. Lan Tianyu gritted his teeth and shouted, I urge you to immediately stop this battle. I can show you a path to leave this place. Ling Han sneered and said, Don't you think I'm trying to obtain the firm essence green gold? Before obtaining this treasure, why should I leave? As he said this, his attacks didn't slow down at all. His Nine Heavens flame-divided soul more so continued to scorch the surroundings with its flaming fists. You're hilariously wrong. Lan Tianyu shouted. My older brother is guarding the firm essence green gold, so you won't be able to get near it at all. Yet, you think that you can enter this island at will, and you can also leave this island with ease. We discovered you people long ago, and we noticed that there was no ascending origin tier elite among you. It was because of this that we allowed you onto the island. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to discover this island even if you'd searched for it your entire life. Similarly, without my guidance, you'll find that you can't leave this island at all. No matter how you sail, you'll only be able to go in circles in the nearby sea. You'll never be able to leave. Ling Han replied with an "Oh." Sure enough, apart from the giant storm, everything else had been the doing of these islanders. He smiled and said, Thank you for telling me. However, I've still decided to kill you. Why? Lan Tianyu stammered. He was completely stunned by Ling Han's decision. Why was there such a strange person in the world? Why did he insist on seeking death? Because I won't die, Ling Han said in a calm voice. He was brimming with confidence. Where is your confidence coming from? Lan Tianyu felt like he was about to go crazy. How had he come across such a person? Ling Han was only at the dividing soul tier, yet he actually dared to be so confident and cocky. No, you'll definitely die. You'll definitely die a miserable death, he roared. After learning that Ling Han was intent on killing him, He finally gave up on all hope. He did everything he could to break free. After all, staying put would only mean dying a little slower. If he fought with his life, he might still have a sliver of a chance to survive. However, this was naturally a futile struggle. Pooh! Ling Han's sword pierced Lan Tianyu's chest. Before an expression of despair could even spread across Lan Tianyu's face, the flaming fist of the nine heavens' flame-divided soul had already smashed over. Boom! With a crack, Lan Tianyu's head exploded into smithereens. However, not a single drop of blood sprayed into the surroundings. This was because they were instantly vaporized by the scorching flames. Ling Han retracted his sword and drew his nine heavens flame-divided soul back into the Black Tower, where it would continue to cultivate. Such a lengthy delay. But it should be fine, right? Ling Han murmured to himself. He continued to hurriedly advance with his sword. After another hour or so, he suddenly felt his body tilting forward slightly. To his surprise, there was no more resistance before him. However, a dividing soul tier elite naturally wouldn't fall so easily. He immediately steadied himself. A path surprisingly appeared before him. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. This was a path that had been dug out by the residents of this island. Lying at the end of this path was naturally the firm essence green gold. What a coincidence! Ling Han nodded upon seeing this. He had forged his own path while searching for the firm essence green gold, and his path had coincidentally intersected with the path that the residents of the island had dug. The chances of this happening were most likely very minuscule. However, it had happened to him. Ling Han concealed the path that he had created before continuing down the one created by the residents. At this moment, he didn't need to use his divine demon sword to absorb the regulations of metal anymore. Instead, he could advance at a brisk pace. After another 30 minutes, the area in front of him suddenly opened up. This was a colossal cave. The radius of this cave measured 3,000 meters or so, and its depth was more so extremely astonishing. Before Ling Han could even lean forward to observe this cave, a burst of murderous aura suddenly rose from its depths and slashed into the roof, where it left a deep gash. What devastating destructive ability! Ling Han was already well aware of the composition of this place. Dirt and stone had already transformed into metal, and they were as stiff and tough as could be. Even his full power strike could only leave a small dent in the wall. Only by using his divine demon sword to absorb the regulations of metal of the surroundings could he hope to cause any significant damage. However, this burst of murderous aura had managed to leave a gash of several feet deep in the roof of the cave. This was truly terrifying. The firm essence green gold was definitely at the bottom of this cave. Ling Han immediately leaped forward. Whoosh! He then immediately entered the Black Tower. Allowing gravity to do its work, the Black Tower instantly plunged down. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Bursts of murderous aura continued to slash over from the bottom of the cave. However, because the Black Tower was far too small, it was naturally incredibly difficult for it to be hit. However, there were still times when the Black Tower was hit, causing it to strike the sides of the cave before bouncing back and continuing to fall. Like a pebble thrown down a well, the Black Tower continued to ping-pong back and forth. Only after a whopping 2 hours did it finally come to rest. It had reached the bottom. This cave was truly very deep. Moreover, this place was still huge, with a radius of 1,500 meters or so. In the center region, there rested a piece of green metal. Right now, a middle-aged man was standing 30 or so meters away from it. Chapter 2024. Astonishing conversation. This middle-aged man looked no different from normal people, and there was no aura of power or dominance about him. If there were anything unusual about him, then it was the black lotus symbol between his brows. This was a lotus with 9 petals, and it was so black that one couldn't help but feel apprehension. Is this the island master? Ling Han observed him from within the Black Tower. He didn't act rashly. The firm essence green gold was right before him, and he could already feel its boundless might even though he was still inside the Black Tower. Metal, this was a matter that possessed a razor-sharp, murderous aura. It was capable of annihilating all matter. Ling Han couldn't help but frown. The firm essence green gold was right before him, but how was he going to obtain it? Leave the Black Tower? That would be seeking death. Fortunately, the The middle-aged man wasn't showing signs of trying to obtain the firm essence green gold anytime soon, either. Whoosh! At this moment, a figure suddenly descended into the cave, avoiding the bursts of murderous auras as it did so. This person landed beside the middle-aged man. This person also had a lotus with 9 petals between his brows. "Brother Che," the middle-aged man said with a nod. The new arrival was also a middle-aged man. However, he was more solidly built, and he stared at the firm essence green gold as he said, "Brother Lan, we've already waited for several million years. Now, it's finally time to reap the rewards." "Heh, we haven't wasted all these years either. With this island as our base, we've sent many people into the outside world to spread the magnificence of our religion," the first middle-aged man said with a chuckle. He was none other than the island master, Lan Tianyu. The other middle-aged man was called Che Yuanhua. He also chuckled before saying, "The world is filled with foolish people. Even though the cultivation system of our sect is more powerful, they still resist it with such passion and fervor. They almost destroyed our sect, so we have no choice but to act covertly. These days are nearing an end. We're about to write a new chapter in history." Their eyes were gleaming, and they appeared as excited as could be. "After obtaining this source power of heaven and earth, Sect Master will definitely reward us richly. At that time, we might be able to reach the 10th lotus." Ling Han was astounded upon hearing this. This was a large organization. Ascent Route Island was only the tip of the iceberg. 10th lotus? Both of these people had a lotus with 9 petals between their brows. Following this logic, the 10th lotus would allow their lotuses to gain another petal. Lan Ruaji had mentioned that the island master was at a cultivation level equivalent to the ascending origin tier. Since he was at the 9th lotus, the 10th lotus would most likely mean reaching the consummate level of the ascending origin tier. Perhaps it might even equate to the celestial king tier. Moreover, even the dispatched individuals were at the ascending origin tier, so just what cultivation level were the higher-ups of the sect at? What cultivation level was the sect master at? Judging from their conversation, members of their sect had already entered the eastern and western celestial realms, where they were spreading this new cultivation system and popularizing their deity. However, perhaps this was only occurring among those at lower cultivation levels, and it was because of this that Ling Han hadn't been aware of it. However, one had to realize that even though elites were mighty and domineering, with celestial kings being able to decide the fate of a battle, it was those at the lower levels who were the true foundation of heaven and earth. If the majority of lower-level beings transitioned to this new cultivation system, this expanse of heaven and earth wouldn't be far from collapse and destruction. However, Ling Han found this extremely strange. If this expanse of heaven and earth collapsed, what good would that be to these people? Or perhaps they weren't aware of their own danger at all. Perhaps the allure of power had clouded their judgment. That being the case, what force was trying to destroy this world? Ling Han was struck with astonishment. According to Small Tower, heavenly venerates were the most powerful beings of the celestial realm. They had genuinely broken free from the grasp of the world. In fact, the original owner of the Black Tower was such a heavenly venerate. However, he had died. Whom had he been killed by? Perhaps he had been killed by the founder of this different cultivation system. At this moment, a torrent of thought surged through Ling Han's mind. His hands and feet felt ice-cold. The level of this conflict was already far beyond what he could control. In fact, even 9th Heaven celestial kings didn't have the right to participate in this conflict. If they did, they would be nothing more than cannon fodder. Ji Wuming had reincarnated to recultivate, and he more so gave off a demeanor of representing justice. Perhaps he had also noticed this impending danger? Perhaps it was because of this that he had resolutely decided to reincarnate. Ling Han asked himself, if the celestial realm were facing impending disaster, would he sacrifice a portion of prodigies for the sake of his family, friends, and lovers? His answer to this was something that he didn't dare face. For the sake of the greater good, it was necessary for one to make some small sacrifices. Anyone could say this. However, who would be willing to be sacrificed? For example, what if someone said that the celestial realm would be eternally safe as long as Ling Han committed suicide, and it would face destruction otherwise? Would Ling Han be willing to commit suicide? As his mind conflicted over this, he suddenly felt warmth wrapping around his hands. The Empress and Hu Niu had walked over to hold his hands, causing his disquiet mind to immediately find some tranquility. His mind became resolute. For the sake of his lovers, so what if he became a demon? Brother Lan, it's almost time to start, correct? Che Yuanhua said. Lan Tianyu nodded and said, Brother Che, let's channel the spiritual technique of death together. All right. The two elites pressed their hands together. Wang! A burst of mystical power instantly surged forth, transforming into a hand that grabbed at the firm essence green gold. Wang! The piece of green metal immediately unleashed a burst of sword light, easily obliterating the giant hand. Ah ma and I chu luo. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu chanted some peculiar spell in unison. Wang! The two stone statues before the ancient castle immediately reacted to their chants, imbuing them with some kind of mystical power. This power was in stark contrast and opposition to the great Tao of heaven and earth, and it immediately triggered a reaction from heaven and earth. Crack! Dark clouds rumbled above the island, with lightning flashing and heavenly tribulation imminent. This cultivation system was facing stern resistance from heaven and earth. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu started to recite the spell even quicker, with countless symbols materializing and rushing toward the firm essence green gold. Like a range of mountains, these symbols caused the source power of heaven and earth to continually quake. It seemed terrified, and it was as if it wanted to flee. However, it was unable to do so. Ling Han was astonished by what he saw. These two people were clearly only at the ascending origin tier, so in theory, they shouldn't have been able to suppress a source power of heaven and earth. Now, however, it looked as if they were genuinely suppressing the firm essence green gold. He could feel the mystical power traveling over from the stone statues before the ancient castle. In fact, this was what astonished him the most. What in the world was this power? It could actually suppress a source power of heaven and earth. No, they're not trying to obtain the source power of heaven and earth. Instead, they're trying to destroy it. Ling Han already possessed 3 source powers of heaven and earth, so he could clearly feel his distaste toward this mystical power. Like fire and water, these two powers were things that couldn't coexist. Victory of one power would signify the destruction of the other power. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were indeed not powerful enough. However, after drawing on the power of the stone statues, they could even destroy a source power of heaven and earth. This was far too astounding. Destroying a source power of heaven and earth is equivalent to dealing a severe blow to heaven and earth, Small Tower said in a calm voice. Source powers of heaven and earth were equivalent to children of heaven and earth. Thus, destroying them would wound heaven and earth, and it would bring great grief upon heaven and earth. This was a destructive blow. Ling Han couldn't allow them to continue. He planned to draw on the power of the Black Tower to fight against them. Even if he couldn't obtain this source power of heaven and earth, he could still at least distract Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu. That way, they wouldn't be able to destroy the firm essence green gold with such ease. He was indeed not powerful enough. However, the Black Tower wasn't weak. After all, this had been the treasure of a heavenly venerate. Boom! Right at this moment, a column of light suddenly descended from above him. A person then descended from the sky. Xiao Gu. Chapter 2025. Reappearance of Xiao Gu. A figure directly charged down from the sky above the island. They smashed through the thick earth, and they appeared at the bottom of this cave like a god. Along with them, they also brought the dazzling light of the starry sky. This was a spectacular sight. Moreover, to Ling Han's surprise, he actually recognized this person. It was Xiao Gu, who should have been in the ancient realm. Ling Han's mouth was slightly agape. It was clear that he was struck with shock. When he had needed to open the gates to the celestial realm, he had once invited Xiao Gu to come along with him. However, Xiao Gu had insisted on remaining in the ancient realm. It was seemingly because he had some unfinished business there. Now, however, he had actually appeared here so suddenly. This was completely beyond Ling Han's imagination. Moreover, Xiao Gu was so powerful now that even Ling Han couldn't determine his exact cultivation. Yeah, Xiao Gu exclaimed. After so many years, he still hadn't changed much. His speech was still like that of an infant, yet his power was simply heaven-defying. His descending fist was filled with power and dominance. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were astonished by his sudden arrival. It was clear that they hadn't expected a person to suddenly descend from the sky. They hurriedly launched attacks to block Xiao Gu. Boom! Xiao Gu was sent flying up by this exchange. Meanwhile, Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were pushed down into the ground. In fact, their feet had already sunk into the ground. One had to realize that the earth here had been transformed into metal by the firm essence green gold, so it was as tough as could be. Yet, the attack of Xiao Gu had actually caused them to sink into the ground. This was a perfect reflection of the overwhelming nature of Xiao Gu's punch. "Ya, die, die, die," Xiao Gu exclaimed. His appearance was no different from before, and he hadn't undergone any changes after becoming more powerful. He charged down from the sky again, launching another punch. Several symbols of the Great Tao bloomed around him. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu exchanged a glance. They could see the shock and confusion in each other's eyes. This island was being protected by a formation, and it was as concealed as could be. As long as they didn't actively deactivate this formation, even low-level celestial kings wouldn't be able to discover it. This was the major reason why this island remained so mysterious. It was not because of its small size. Powerful elites couldn't discover this island at all. Meanwhile, weaker cultivators wouldn't need to think about leaving if they arrived on this island. Even if they could leave, they would have already become a member of this island. Yet, this mysterious elite was clearly only at the ascending origin tier. That being the case, how had he discovered Ascent Route Island? "We can't let him escape," Lan Tianyu said. Che Yuanhua nodded in agreement. Their sect couldn't be exposed, so they had to dispose of all people who weren't part of them. The two elites didn't simply defend this time. Instead, they unleashed all kinds of secret techniques to attack Xiao Gu. It was clear that they were part of the same cultivation system. Even though there were slight differences, their foundation was still ultimately the same. The lotus petals on their foreheads blossomed, with each blossoming petal causing their battle prowess to rise by another level. Xiao Gu was facing two elites by himself, yet he wasn't being pushed onto his back foot at all. One of his bones was glowing, and it summoned a dazzling symbol of the Great Tao that bestowed him with boundless power. Fuck! How is Xiao Gu's strength advancing so quickly? Ling Han was already very proud of his quick advance in cultivation level. Compared to Xiao Gu, however, he was still lagging very far behind. That glowing bone of Xiao Gu was definitely the bone of a celestial king. Otherwise, how could it be so vicious and powerful? Right now, it could even rival the power of ascending origin tier elites. In any case, he could seize this opportunity to obtain the firm essence green gold. Ling Han silently exited the Black Tower. He then channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and it was as if he were a blooming flower trying to attract the attention of a pollinating bee. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were both deeply astonished by the sudden appearance of another person. With their strength, they surprisingly hadn't discovered that Ling Han had been hiding near them the entire time. Moreover, this person was only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator. They wanted to stop Ling Han, yet Xiao Gu was far too vicious and powerful. He blocked their path, disallowing them from approaching Ling Han. However, they immediately calmed down. Even they had to rely on the power of the deity if they wanted to obtain the source power of heaven and earth, so how could a measly dividing soul tier cultivator succeed? Meanwhile, Xiao Gu was definitely a formidable foe who they had to treat with utmost care. They had to dispose of Xiao Gu first. Ling Han. Xiao Gu stammered. His voice was filled with delight. Ling Han simply nodded in acknowledgement. Right now, he didn't have the time to greet Xiao Gu. There were few opportunities to obtain source powers of heaven and earth, so he definitely had to remain completely focused. Wang, Wang, Wang. Numerous symbols of the Great Tao started to light up on Ling Han's body, glowing at times and appearing dim at others. This was already beyond the power of the dividing soul tier. In fact, its appearance was not because Ling Han had summoned it, but rather because the indestructible Heaven Scroll was resonating with heaven and earth. The firm essence green gold also started to glow. Moreover, it was shuddering slightly, and symbols of the Great Tao also lit up on its surface. The two of them were performing some kind of communication. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were shocked upon seeing this. This measly dividing soul tier cultivator actually possessed the ability to obtain the firm essence green gold. This was far too unfathomable. Brother Che, go and kill that brat, Lan Tianyu said. I'll hold this person back. Obtaining this source power of heaven and earth was a critical matter for the sect. Otherwise, Lan Tianyu wouldn't have guarded this place for several million years. Thus, he definitely couldn't allow Ling Han to obtain the firm essence green gold. If he failed, he would suffer severe punishment from the sect. I'm on it, Che Yuanhua replied. He turned around to charge at Ling Han. He only needed to unleash a single strike. Yeah. Xiao Gu exclaimed as he reached over to block Che Yuanhua. Damn it! Lan Tianyu cursed. Xiao Gu was more powerful than him, and his defenses were also incredible. In fact, he would seem unscathed even after suffering an attack head-on. Lan Tianyu hurriedly composed himself and launched another ferocious attack at Xiao Gu. He had to hold Xiao Gu back no matter what. Boom, boom, boom. The three elites were engaged in an intense battle. One of them wanted to break free to dispose of Ling Han, while another was attempting to stop Xiao Gu. Meanwhile, Xiao Gu was trying to stop the person who was trying to attack Ling Han. This was indeed a vicious and complicated battle. Elsewhere, Ling Han remained completely focused on trying to obtain the firm essence green gold. He trusted Xiao Gu, and he believed that Xiao Gu could definitely hold the two people back. However, was obtaining a source power of heaven and earth an easy matter? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Sure enough, Xiao Gu didn't betray Ling Han's trust. He successfully held Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu back, preventing them from launching even a single attack at Ling Han. Wang wang wang. The vibration of the firm essence green gold became increasingly intense. Countless symbols materialized on its surface, intertwining at an indescribable speed. These were clearly displays of the most valuable Tao of metal, yet none of them could manage to comprehend or capture it. At some point in time, the firm essence green gold suddenly shot toward Ling Han. Damn it! Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were shocked upon seeing this. The firm essence green gold was about to be obtained by Ling Han. Humph! Che Yuanhua roared in anger, facing an attack of Xiao Gu head-on as he finally found an opportunity to break free. He immediately launched a palm strike at Ling Han. This strike was slightly astray as Che Yuanhua had been affected by Xiao Gu. However, it could still scrape Ling Han. This attack was equivalent to that of an ascending origin tier elite, so just how devastating was it? Even if one were only scraped by this attack, they might still be killed by its vast and terrifying power. Pooh! Ling Han was instantly obliterated into a cloud of blood. Boom! A burst of flames erupted, and the firm essence green gold immediately disappeared into this ball of blazing flames. Chapter 2026. Harvest. A look of disdain spread across Che Yuanhua's face. Was this measly dividing soul tier cultivator worthy of fighting for a treasure with them? What a joke! Bad person! Xiao Gu roared in fury. He immediately threw a vicious punch. Che Yuanhua had no time to retrieve Ling Han's dropped treasures. Ling Han definitely possessed rare treasures. Otherwise, how could a dividing soul tier cultivator have escaped their detection? However, Xiao Gu's attacks were far too overwhelming, so he had to deal with them first. He had been struck by Xiao Gu just then, and he could still feel the pain of that strike deep in his bones. Boom! Flames curled through the surroundings, and a paramount aura started to permeate. Damn it! This is the immortal phoenix tribes rising from the ashes. Lan Tianyu exclaimed in astonishment. *T. Che Yuanhua's expression also changed drastically. However, could he still attack Ling Han at this moment? No, this was simply impossible. Xiao Gu was already unleashing a wave of frenzied attacks. Boom, boom, boom. The symbols on his celestial bones started to dazzle, causing his battle prowess to rise explosively. His attacks were so ferocious that Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were reduced to an extremely disheveled state. They could barely protect themselves, so how could they possibly attack Ling Han? This was unless they were willing to exchange a life for a life. However, sacrificing a 9th Lotus Elite in order to kill a dividing soul tier cultivator? What an absolute joke. Boom! Flames flickered and danced, transforming into a colossal phoenix that quickly crumbled and vanished. From amid the raging flames, a young man walked forth. Was this not Ling Han? Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu looked over, only to see the firm essence green gold vanishing into Ling Han's chest. That was clearly an unbelievably tough piece of metal, yet at this moment, it was as fluid as water. Damn it! Damn it! Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu roared in frustration. However, so what if Ling Han had obtained the source power of heaven and earth? As long as they captured him, their supremely powerful sect master could naturally extract the source power of heaven and earth. That being the case, they would kill Xiao first. The two elites exchanged a glance, and they could both see the resolution in each other's eyes. They unleashed a loud roar. Wang! The lotus between their brows bloomed, upon which a giant lotus also materialized behind their backs. The lotuses swayed slightly, and as they resonated, the two stone statues before the ancient castle instantly bestowed them with even more power, raising the battle prowess of the two elites. However, activating this technique clearly came at a cost. Streaks of blood appeared on the elites' faces, necks, hands, and wherever else Ling Han could see. Their skin split apart, and blood gushed forth. It was as if their skin were about to split open and be shed from their bodies. They started to launch a ferocious counterattack, and they were intent on suppressing and killing Xiao. Upon seeing Ling Han come back to life, Xiao's rage instantly subsided by a significant amount. Along with it, his battle prowess also fell by a significant amount. With him becoming weaker and the two elites becoming stronger, their battle prowess suddenly became very evenly matched. In fact, Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu even enjoyed a slight edge. However, Xiao's physique was indeed very powerful. One had to realize that his body wasn't real, and it was actually something that he had summoned. Thus, it wouldn't matter even if his body were obliterated. In reality, he was only a single bone. As long as his celestial bone wasn't broken, he wouldn't be killed. In fact, this was most likely the bone of a celestial king, a high-level celestial king. Thus, could it be broken by two ascending origin tier elites? Ling Han wasn't worried about Xiao at all. Right now, he was fusing together with the source power of heaven and earth, and this was causing a tremendous change in his dantian. Another source power of heaven and earth had arrived. Even though the nine heavens flame had ventured out, the source power that it represented was still unchanged. It was still one of Ling Han's three source powers. Thus, this was now a gathering of four source powers, so it was naturally extremely lively. There was a moment of struggle, and with Ling Han's interference, the source powers finally reached a point of equilibrium. The nine heavens flame, Shenin source water, fiery flame lightning strike wood, and firm essence green gold naturally conquered the large majority of the territory. Meanwhile, the combined territory occupied by the power of time, the power of space, the power of slaughter, and the power of lightning was smaller than the territory occupied by any one of the source powers of heaven and earth. This was inevitable. After all, source powers of heaven and earth were essentially equivalent to celestial kings. A smile tugged at the corners of Ling Han's lips. He now possessed four source powers of heaven and earth. This was incredibly impressive. At this moment, he could advance another step in the dividing soul tier. Moreover, since he was now aware that one needed to divide their souls 9 times to reach a state of perfection, he wouldn't shirk no matter what. He definitely had to reach a state of perfection for this cultivation level. Thus, he was in desperate need of source powers of heaven and earth. The more the better. He raised a hand. Wang! An orb of green light appeared above his palm, and it radiated with a terrifying murderous aura. This wasn't an aura of slaughter. Instead, it was the aura of sharpness and murder of the source power of metal. Metal represented sharpness. Ling Han casually waved his hand. Whoosh! A burst of sword chi instantly swept forth, creating a faint gash in the metallic floor beneath him. Even though this was only a faint gash, one had to realize that this floor had been strengthened by a source power of heaven and earth. Indeed, even the battle between Xiao and the two elders was unable to cause any great damage to this floor. At most, they could only leave some small dents. Now, however, Ling Han was able to leave a faint gash. This destructive power was heaven-defying. As expected of this source power, Ling Han combined this power with the regulation of slaughter as he launched another strike. There was a loud screech as another gash appeared on the metallic floor. This gash was even deeper than the previous one. Sure enough, the combination of two regulations would lead to even greater destructive power. Enlightenment arose in Ling Han's mind. Regulations could be used in combination. For example, if one could only wield a single one of the 5 elements, they would be unable to rival the regulations of time and the regulations of space of celestial kings. If they could wield all of the 5 elements, however, the situation would be completely different. The 5 elements existed in unison and opposition, and if they were channeled correctly, they could unleash a devastating might. Metal, wood, water, fire and earth. Among them, Ling Han was only missing a source power of earth. Right now, he was extremely eager to complete the 5 elements. He was extremely curious about how powerful his attacks would become after he fused the regulations of the 5 elements together. Perhaps, he would become as powerful as Ji Wuming. Ling Han clenched his fists. Even though he had almost been evenly matched with Ji Wuming during their last battle, he understood that his battle prowess was still slightly inferior to the other parties. Moreover, obtaining this source power of heaven and earth wouldn't make much difference. After all, Ji Wuming was the reincarnation of a 9th heaven celestial king. As such, the regulations that he wielded were most likely all at the celestial king tier. This was equivalent to possessing various source powers of heaven and earth. It was because of this that Ji Wuming was more powerful than him, even though they were at the same cultivation level. I can't help but feel eager with anticipation. After I obtain a source power of earth, I'll challenge Ji Wuming to another duel. Ling Han murmured to himself. His eyes were gleaming with fighting spirit. Now, however, he unsheathed his divine demon sword. There was so much godly metal here, so how could he waste it? The divine demon sword's appetite was instantly aroused, and it started to voraciously devour the surrounding godly metal. Wang! The regulations of metal were continuously absorbed by the divine demon sword, and it was as if the sword were being reforged. Incredible! Soar to the level of celestial tool. Ling Han knew that he was dreaming. However, this wouldn't affect anyone, would it? Boom! The battle between Xiao Gu and the 2 elites became increasingly intense and violent. In fact, the cave was now filled with countless small dents. Their battle continued to drag on. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The earth quaked and mountains shook, and even Ling Han couldn't withstand the shock waves of their battle anymore. He had no choice but to retreat into the Black Tower. However, he left the divine demon sword outside, where it could continue to absorb the essence of metal. After around 7 days, the essence of metal in the surroundings was almost completely exhausted. This was easily observed from the battle between the 3 elites. Instead of just small dents, they could now blast giant craters in the surrounding cave walls. In fact, seawater was flowing in from some of the craters, and this was tangible evidence of just how ruined the surrounding area had already become. Leave! Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu suddenly leaped into the sky. Chapter 2027. Power of the Poisonous Fruit. After battling for several days, Lan Tianyu and Che Yuanhua discovered that Xiao Gu couldn't be hurt. It wasn't that he couldn't be injured. Rather, it was useless even if they wounded him. In fact, they had once managed to shatter Xiao Gu's head after making huge sacrifices themselves. However, what use had it been? Xiao Gu had casually regrown another head. In reality, Xiao Gu's entire body was a creation of his. As long as his celestial bone existed, he would exist. Thus, what did it matter if his head were smashed? At this moment, Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu felt like giving up and retreating. They couldn't defeat Xiao Gu. Whoosh! They leaped into the sky, unwilling to battle with Xiao Gu any longer. Otherwise, their fate would definitely be death. They didn't want to suffer punishment, but they more so didn't want to die here. Thus, they decided to flee even if their secret would be revealed. They refused to fight to the death with Xiao Gu. In any case, the closer they were to the ancient castler, the 2 stone statues, to be more exact, the more power they could draw on. As such, it was only natural that they make their way back up. Battling underground wouldn't help them a single bit. Ling Han waited for a moment before also sheathing his sword. He had already absorbed most of the essence of metal in this place. With a flash, he flew out of the cave. He arrived outside, only to see that Xiao Gu was still engaged in an intense battle with Lan Tianyu and Che Yuanhua. Meanwhile, the people on the island were all gathered around to spectate. They were all stunned by this scene. Wasn't it said that with the protection of their deity, they would be invincible among those at the same cultivation level? However, there had first been Ling Han, and now there was another mysterious Ling Han right now. Xiao Gu had the exact same appearance as Ling Han. What in the world was this? Lan Tianyang and Che Yuanhua were clearly struggling immensely, and this was a huge blow to the islanders' confidence. Xiao Jun immediately leaped over, and asked, "Brother Ling, what's going on?" He was wearing a baleful expression as he glared at Ling Han. Right now, the person who was fighting with the island master and the island envoy looked exactly the same as Ling Han. Thus, who would believe that there was no relationship between them? "Are you questioning me?" Ling Han asked. "I am," Xiao Jun replied in a haughty voice. His battle prowess was indeed inferior to Ling Han's. Right now, however, there were around 10 8th Lotus elites in the surroundings. These elites were equivalent to Immortal Palace tier elites. So what did he need to fear? "Oh, I'm not sure what's going on," Ling Han said, shrugging. He completely denied any relationship with Xiao Gu. "Ling Han!" Xiao Jun roared. "Ling Han, we also need an explanation," the visitors to the island said. Many of them wore expressions of displeasure. They had just defeated a beast tide, and they had just been enjoying the blessings of a deity. Yet, such a furious battle had suddenly erupted, and the assailant was more so identical in appearance to Ling Han. Thus, they were naturally filled with displeasure. "You're purposefully targeting us, right?" "Explanation?" Ling Han scoffed. "What right do you have to seek an explanation from me?" "You're going too far," the visitors to the island roared. "Lord Qin, this person is far too detestable. My lord, please capture him." Qin Wei frowned slightly upon hearing this, and he said, "Ling Han, we're guests on this island right now. Since we're guests, it's best that we don't offend the hosts." Ling Han laughed and said, "What a bunch of fools. You're being toyed around with like monkeys, yet you don't even realize. I understand the feeling, the thirst, of wanting to obtain more power. However, can't you use your A*S to think for a moment? Are there truly such generous people in the world? Even if there are, do these people look like it to you?" Lan Ruaji immediately leaped forward and said, "Young Master Ling, enough with the nonsense. Perhaps you don't want me anymore?" Ling Han involuntarily shuddered. "Stop trying to disgust me." "You," Lan Ruaji's slender body shuddered slightly, and her expression instantly changed. She thought extremely highly of herself, and she was convinced that she was as beautiful as a celestial maiden. In fact, all men should have been intoxicated by her beauty. Yet, Ling Han was actually treating her with such disdain. This was naturally a huge blow to her dignity, and it caused her to descend into wild fury. "Junior sister, it's best that you give up on him," Xiao Jun said with a cold chuckle. "His heart is filled with evil, and his actions are filled with suspicious intent. I suggest that we capture him and directly pluck his soul. Enforcement officers, please capture this person," he said to the 8th Lotus elites. "I'll capture him," a middle-aged man said, and stepped forward. A lotus with 8 petals suddenly materialized between his brows. This was a unique symbol of their cultivation technique, one which was usually hidden. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Why don't you all come at me together? That way, I can save some time." "You're but a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, yet you dare to speak to me with such audacity?" the middle-aged man said with a sneer. To say nothing of receiving a blessing from the deity, even if he didn't, those at the 8th Lotus were still equivalent to Immortal Palace tier elites. As such, suppressing a dividing soul tier cultivator would be as easy as a flip of his hand. Ling Han started to accumulate power. With his strength, he naturally couldn't hope to rival an Immortal Palace tier elite. However, he still had an ultimate trump card. Thump, thump, thump. The middle-aged man strode over, with each of his steps giving off a deep and heavy thud that shook one's heart. He was threatening Ling Han, and he was placing pressure on Ling Han. "Brat, I truly don't understand. Where is your courage coming from?" the middle-aged man asked with a cold sneer. "You're about to find out," Ling Han said with a grin. There was a glimmer of danger in his eyes. His cracking light sphere had already finished charging. Boom! Arcs of lightning instantly exploded into the surroundings. The middle-aged man couldn't help but sneer in disdain. This attack was indeed powerful. However, it could at most only threaten a 7th Lotus Elite. To an 8th Lotus Elite like him, such an attack wouldn't pose any threat at all. The Elite activated a small portion of his defenses. Crack, crack, crack. Arcs of lighting gathered on his shield of black light, yet they were completely unable to penetrate it. This was completely expected. After all, it would be truly strange if a dividing soul tier cultivator could breach the defenses of an immortal palace elite. However, this was the cracking light sphere, and its target wasn't only the middle-aged man. Instead, this was an attack that didn't differentiate between friend and foe, and would attack everyone within its range. In fact, if Ling Han overcharged it, it might even cause damage to Ling Han himself. Thus, the arcs of violent lightning also shot toward the people in the surroundings. However, because these people were standing relatively far away, the lightning did little damage to them even if it struck them. These arcs of lightning possessed little power, so their damage could almost be completely ignored. However, was this truly the case? The middle-aged man wore a disdainful smile, and he was just about to step forward to kill Ling Han. "Playtime is over, brat. You huh?" His expression changed drastically. His shield of black light was being rapidly corroded by the arcs of lightning. At the same time, screams of agony immediately sounded in the surroundings. Looking around, one could see that many people had already collapsed to the ground, with their bodies being rapidly corroded. What in the world was going on? Ling Han was only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, so how had he unleashed an attack that could even threaten an 8th Lotus Elite? The elite was immediately plunged into a desperate situation. A vicious corrosive power was rapidly piercing through his defenses and yearning to destroy his body. At this moment, he had no option but to sit down and resist this attack with his full power. Ah! Screams of pain and misery echoed around the surroundings. However, these screams disappeared just as quickly as they had appeared. This was because the people struck by the arcs of lightning had already transformed into puddles of blood. Fuck! What the hell is this? To say nothing of others being petrified, even Ling Han was deeply astonished by the power of this attack. The red-spotted green bamboo was far too freakish. Indeed, his cracking light sphere had only been a decoy attack. In reality, he had used this attack to conceal and deliver the poison of the red-spotted green bamboo. This was poison that could even kill immortal palace tier elites. Thud, thud, thud. The remaining people hurriedly retreated. There was terror in their eyes, and as they looked at Ling Han, it was as if they were looking at a sinister demon. Chapter 2028. Blood Sacrifice. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I never go back on my words." Xiao Jun and the others couldn't help but shudder. This was because the 8th Lotus Elite started to wail in agony as Ling Han spoke. At the same time, his body was being corroded at a rate that was visible to the naked eye. If he had resolutely abandoned his physical body at the first instance, his divine sense could have still survived. At that time, he could have looked for a new body to possess. However, he hadn't fathomed the devastating nature of the red-spotted green bamboo, and he had dared to struggle against it with his own cultivation. His decision was an act of seeking death. In just a few seconds, a mighty immortal palace tier elite had already been reduced to nothing more than a puddle of blood. Both his physical body and divine sense were annihilated. Was this not petrifying? What in the world did you do? Xiao Jun asked in a trembling voice. He had always been a calm and composed person. Even after losing to Ling Han that time, he had immediately come up with a way to deal with the situation. He had admitted his loss and minimized the questioning of his authority. Now, however, he was completely shaken by the scene before him. He couldn't calm down no matter what. That was an 8th Lotus Elite. Yet, he had actually been killed by Ling Han in a single strike. This was simply inconceivable. Ling Han wore a wide smile, and he said, "You people have your deity, and I naturally have mine as well." Just then, I drew on the power of my deity. In comparison, the deity of you people is only the. In fact, I can instantly kill an elite one major tier above me. Sigh. He shook his head with an expression of utter disdain. Xiao Jun and the others were enraged upon hearing this. However, they couldn't say anything in retort. They couldn't argue against reality. Kill all of the outsiders. Begin a blood sacrifice. Lan Tianyu's voice suddenly traveled over. What? Everyone was shocked upon hearing this. The guests of the island were shocked because they hadn't imagined that the islanders would suddenly turn against them. After all, hadn't their relationship been cordial just a moment ago? They had fought a beast tied together, and they had even agreed to pray to the deity together. In the future they would have become like family. Meanwhile, the residents of the island were also deeply astonished. Their island master was actually going to conduct a blood sacrifice. This was their final trump card. After conducting a blood sacrifice, the two deity statues would temporarily provide one with more impressive power. However, when this blessing expired, the blessed person would immediately suffer severe wounds. Thus, this was a final trump card. With them ordering a blood sacrifice, did this mean that Lan Tianyu and Che Yuanhua were also facing grave danger? Hurry up! What are you still standing around for? Lan Tianyu roared. He and Che Yuanhua were already on the verge of collapse. Xiao Gu was an undying freak, so if their battle continued, they would definitely be killed. Xiao Jun and the others were immediately shaken back to their senses. They then glared at the outsiders with baleful and murderous expressions. Blood sacrifice. Such a sacrificial offering naturally needed more than just fresh blood. It also needed life. In reality, vitality was the most essential ingredient of a blood sacrifice. The more vitality a blood sacrifice received, the more powerful the blood sacrifice would be. Die! Xiao Jun and the others roared as they charged at Qin Wei and the other outsiders. However, everyone avoided Ling Han as if in tacit understanding. They didn't dare to attack him. He had killed an 8th Lotus elite with a single strike, and he had also killed a large number of other cultivators in the process. As such, who dared to attack him? In fact, they didn't even dare to approach him. They avoided him to the best of their ability. Ling Han involuntarily stroked his chin. Was he that frightening? Ah! The islanders launched a furious assault, and there were several 8th Lotus elites among them. These elites were equivalent to Immortal Palace tier elites. Meanwhile, Qin Wei was the only Immortal Palace tier elite among the outsiders. That being the case, how could they resist the vicious attack of the islanders? Pu. Several people were immediately killed. They were violently beheaded, causing fountains of blood to spray into the sky. With each person they killed, the islanders would make a strange pose. It was as if they were praying, yet it was also as if they were dancing. This was a ritual of the blood sacrifice. Wang! The two stone statues suddenly underwent a peculiar change. Like a drought being ended by rain, they were instantly filled with renewed vitality. The blood sacrifice was working. Che Yuanhua's and Lan Tianyu's battle prowess instantly shot up by a noticeable amount. This allowed them to escape from the perilous situation and catch a breath. If they became even stronger, it was genuinely possible that they could turn the tables and suppress Xiao Gu instead. They naturally couldn't kill him, but they could at least subdue him and buy time for the islanders to retreat. Ling Han immediately frowned. He didn't want to let these people flee. He had to sabotage this blood sacrifice. Young Master Ling, save me. An outsider fought their way over, and they begged Ling Han to save them. Some islanders had been pursuing them, yet upon noticing Ling Han, they immediately stopped in their tracks. They were terrified of this demon. Ling Han glanced at the person before him, only to discover that this was the person who had sold him out before. He couldn't help but feel astonished. Just how shameless was this person? Whoosh! Upon seeing someone successfully escaping, many others also fought their way over. They treated Ling Han as a protective cover. These people, most of them had been loudly criticizing Ling Han just then. Moreover, after temporarily escaping, these people didn't even offer a word of thanks to Ling Han. In their eyes, they were all outsiders, so it was only natural that Ling Han offered a helping hand. No. Ling Han shook his head. These people were truly a bunch of trash. Their existence was a shame to this world. Since he couldn't let these people be killed for the blood sacrifice, he was willing to become a demon himself. Boom! Ling Han launched a punch, sending flames soaring into the sky. The person who had sold him out was instantly reduced to ashes. Fucking hell. Do you people think I'm a saint? You think I'll repay evil with good? Am I stupid? Ling Han, what are you doing? We've all come from the same place. You're completely inhumane. Young Master Ling, spare me. The outsiders all exclaimed in shock. Some were scolding Ling Han, while others were begging for their life. At the end of the day, they were all seeking to live. What a bunch of trash. You don't deserve to live in this world, Ling Han said with a cold expression. As he said this, his palm lashed out again. If these people had shown just a tiny bit more righteousness and courage while on the island, he wouldn't have minded drawing them into his spatial god tool. He would have offered a helping hand. Now, however, hurry up and die, trash. Please don't cause me any more trouble. The outsiders hurriedly started to flee. However, to their despair, they discovered that they were trapped between a tiger and a pack of wolves. Death was the only fate awaiting them. Ah! Wails of agony were incessant as the outsiders were killed one after another. Ling Han didn't feel a shred of sympathy. His heart of kindness had already been worn away by these people. Die! His heart was like steel as he unleashed the heaven-destroying 9 swords. Fusing this attack with his source power of metal, he was able to unleash an unfathomably devastating attack. Even an Earth Soul elite would be instantly killed if they were scraped by this attack. However, there were several 8th Lotus elites among the islanders, after all, so several outsiders were still killed and offered for sacrifice by them. Che Yuanhua's and Lan Tianyu's battle prowess instantly rose by an explosive amount. However, this still wasn't enough. Even after all of the outsiders had been killed, their battle prowess was still insufficient to suppress Xiao Gu. More. Sacrifice more. Lan Tianyu yelled in a shrill voice. Sacrifice more? Whom could they still kill? Ling Han was the only remaining outsider. To say nothing of whether they could kill him, even if they could, a single person wouldn't make much difference to the blood sacrifice. That being the case, whom did Lan Tianyu want them to kill? They could only kill their own members. Xiao Jun's expression became ice-cold, and he roared, "You heard, Island Master!" Several 8th Lotus elites instantly lashed out, mercilessly killing those beside them. Pu. One after another, numerous heads flew into the sky, signifying the continuation of the blood sacrifice. Chapter 2029. All killed. Following Lan Tianyu's command for more sacrifices, 100 or so islanders were immediately killed. The surroundings became a sea of blood. The blood sacrifice resumed, and Che Yuanhua's and Lan Tianyu's battle prowess instantly soared again. They finally managed to suppress Xiao Gu. Earth-locking technique. They roared in unison. Wisps of black air flowed from their fingertips, transforming into lengths of thread that wrapped around Xiao Gu, and preventing him from moving freely. It didn't matter that they couldn't kill him. As long as they could capture him, they could take him away and bring him before more powerful elites. At that time, they would be able to thoroughly exterminate this great threat. Xiao Gu fought and struggled, yet he was unable to break free. There's also this brat, Lan Tianyu said as he turned around. He glared at Ling Han. They had to capture Ling Han and bring him back to their sect as well. After all, he possessed a source power of heaven and earth, and this was something that their sect master had specifically asked them to obtain. I'll capture him, Che Yuanhua said as he strode toward Ling Han. He was a 9th Lotus elite, which was equivalent to being an ascending origin tier elite. With a single thought, he could kill Ling Han several times over. Ling Han smiled and said, I suggest you look after yourselves first. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyong turned around to look at Xiao Gu, only to see a wisp of light shining within him. This light then transformed into a dazzling symbol. Whoosh! The symbol flew out from Xiao Gu's body, instantly obliterating the black threads around him with an overwhelming force. Xiao regained his freedom. Yeah. He was enraged, and he launched a flurry of vicious attacks at Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu again. This time, he more so retrieved a bone from his body. This bone was his true body, and there was a celestial king tier symbol dazzling atop it. This bone could be viewed as a celestial tool, one which possessed a devastating might. With a single attack it could shatter heaven and earth. Rumble. One after another, numerous celestial bodies started to rain down from the sky. These were meteors that were as large as mountains. How could Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu block this? They weren't struck, yet just the shockwaves emitted by these meteors caused them to cough blood as they retreated in disarray. They couldn't block this power at all. Xiao was unleashing a divine might, and this was a completely unstoppable force. Retreat! Hurry up and retreat! Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu immediately turned around to retreat without regard for anything else. Right now, they were facing the full might of a celestial tool. How could they hope to rival it? However, they were still too slow. Xiao wielded that bone, which was dazzling with celestial light. Boom! In just a short moment, one of Che Yuanhua's arms was severed by the celestial light. Meanwhile, Lan Tianyu had already lost a leg. They appeared as miserable as could be. However, to these two elites, such wounds were completely acceptable. As long as they managed to flee, they could still regenerate their severed arms and legs. It was a pity that Xiao wouldn't give them such a chance. He was unstoppable as he swung his celestial king bone. Ling Han also didn't rest, and he started to launch a flurry of vicious attacks at Xiao Jun and the others. He had to complete his job of exterminating evil. Ah! The agonized wails of Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were incessant. The power of a celestial king had already been unleashed, so how could they measly Ninth Lotus elites hope to block it? Death was their only fate. Xiao was filled with vicious rage, and after killing Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu, he immediately turned his attention to the other islanders. This was a one-sided massacre, and with a flash of celestial light, all of the islanders were immediately killed. Only 3 people remained alive. Ling Han, Xiao and Qin Wei. Qin Wei was still alive, and this was because he was an immortal palace tier elite, meaning that he had been able to block the attacks of the 8th Lotus elites. Moreover, he was a normal person, so he hadn't been targeted by Xiao. Otherwise, if he had participated in that ceremony and offered his soul to the deity, he would have definitely been killed by Xiao at this moment. In any case, Qin Wei's expression was extremely grim at this moment. His eyes were filled with terror as he looked at Xiao. Xiao, long time no see, Ling Han said with a loud laugh. Yeah. Xiao's vicious aura instantly vanished, and he flashed an innocent smile at Ling Han. Xiao, long time no see. Fine, he's being a parrot again. Ling Han shook his head and asked, Xiao, how did you come to the celestial realm? Xiao, how did you come to the celestial realm? Xiao repeated. Holy! How long has it been? You still haven't learned to talk yet? How has your strength grown so rapidly? Ling Han asked. He wasn't willing to give up. How has your strength grown so rapidly? Sigh. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. Xiao also sighed in reply. Sigh. Ling Han pondered for a moment, and he decided that it was only normal that Xiao had come to the celestial realm. After reaching a certain level of strength, he could naturally shatter the gates to the celestial realm. However, the rapid growth of his power was still far too astonishing. Thinking about it carefully, however, Xiao wasn't a human, and he was only a bone. Thus, he naturally didn't face any barriers in advancing cultivation level. Ling Han pushed these thoughts from his mind. Xiao, oh, Xiao, how can I communicate with you? Ling Han really wanted to know what Xiao had experienced during his lifetime. He had definitely been a celestial king, so how had he died? Moreover, he still detested these cultivators of the other system with such passion after dying. Just what had he experienced before? It was a shame that Xiao only knew how to say yaya or be a parrot. He couldn't express his own thoughts at all. Should he wait for Lu Herong? Ling Han removed the formation over the island. This way, Lu Herong wouldn't miss it when she passed by. However, perhaps Lu Herong had already examined this region before. With her confidence as a celestial king, she naturally wouldn't examine the region a second time. In any case, Ling Han would wait for now. At this moment, he was extremely interested in the two stone statues. Pa! However, Ling Han's eyes immediately widened in astonishment. This was because Xiao Gu didn't give him any chance to investigate the two statues. Upon seeing them, he immediately lashed out to destroy them. Yeah. Xiao Gu was extremely proud, and as he looked at Ling Han, it was as if he were asking for praise. Holy crap! Right now, Ling Han only had himself to blame. He hadn't told Xiao Gu beforehand, and he should have known that Xiao Gu had an immense dislike for evil. There was nothing he could do about this. It was time to leave the island. Ling Han chopped wood to make a boat, and Qin Wei was also doing the same thing. However, he didn't dare to approach Ling Han and Xiao Gu. Instead, he hid far away, and he worked hard by himself. Meanwhile, Ling Han also let the Empress and the others out from the Black Tower. The Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had both seen Xiao Gu before, so they weren't surprised by his presence. However, Hunyou and Bewitching Maiden Ro were both astonished upon seeing him. Shirley and Yu more so started to exclaim in surprise, shouting about how they had two stepfathers. Ha! Why do you look the same as Niu's Ling Han? Hunyou asked as she looked Xiao Gu up and down. Ha! Why do you look the same as Niu's Ling Han? Xiao Gu instantly became excited upon seeing so many new people. Why are you so strange? Not only are you copying someone else's appearance, but you're even copying other people's words. Why are you so fun? So fun. There was a glimmer in Hunyou's eyes, and it was clear that she was enjoying playing around with Xiao Gu. Even though Ling Han wasn't a skilled craftsman, he still managed to construct a boat after a day of work. This boat was only around 3 meters long, and it was only around 1 meter wide. In any case, it only needed to hold 1 or 2 people. After all, there was still the Black Tower. Ling Han and Xiao Gu boarded the boat. Meanwhile, the others returned inside the Black Tower. Even though the boat was small, it had been constructed from trees that grew in the boundless seas. Thus, it could easily block the sea waves, and there was no danger of it capsizing. Moreover, with Xiao Gu as a guard, their safety was also not a problem. Even if they encountered Sea King-class creatures, Xiao Gu could still scare them away by activating his celestial bone. 17 years later, the small boat successfully reached the seashore. Chapter 2030. Reaching the Western Celestial Realm. They had arrived at the Western Celestial Realm. Ling Han immediately felt the difference of this place. Compared to the Eastern Celestial Realm, the spiritual qi here was far more concentrated. Because of this, the spiritual herbs and celestial medicines in the Western Celestial Realm were of higher quality and more abundant than those in the Eastern Celestial Realm. It was no wonder that the overall level of cultivation in the Western Celestial Realm was superior. Their environment was already better. Ling Han turned to Hunyou and asked, "Niu, where's the Rock Palace?" "Ha!" Hunyou blinked and replied, "The Rock Palace is naturally where the Rock Palace is." Ling Han grimaced and asked, "So you don't know where your home is?" "Niu doesn't need to know," Hunyou said. However, this was indeed expected. With this glutton's personality, how could she care about her surroundings? She would be satisfied as long as she could eat and play. Fine. There's clearly a member of the Rock Palace here, yet we have absolutely no clue about where the Rock Palace is located. Then we can only ask someone. They disembarked from the ship and continued to journey forward. A lush forest appeared before them, and their eyes lit up upon seeing it. Gazing at the unchanging sea had been far too boring. Now that they could see some greenery, they naturally felt completely refreshed. Let's look for the nearest city. We can then ask around and find the way to the Rock Palace. They set off in some direction, and they were convinced that they would eventually come across a city. 7 days later. Rumble. The earth suddenly started to quake, and it was as if there were an earthquake. Ling Han looked over, only to see a wave rushing toward them. No, this wasn't a wave. Instead, it was an army. They were either marching forward or in the process of fleeing. In any case, They were lightning quick, and there were mountain-like elephants charging alongside them. There were also rocks with a wingspan of several thousand meters soaring through the sky, and there were many armored warriors wielding their spears as they danced in the air. There were numerous elites among them, and they were all radiating with extremely terrifying auras. With so many of them together, their advance naturally caused the earth to quake. It was as if heaven and earth were about to collapse. This was a fleeing army. Ling Han determined this after observing them for a brief moment. After all, ordinary armies wouldn't abandon their armor and weapons. Moreover, they wouldn't be carrying such a large number of wounded warriors, and their morale wouldn't be so low. There was a flag among them, and Ling Han saw the moon-shaped symbol on this flag. This flag was being held by a golden giant that measured 30 meters in height. The army quickly arrived before them before hurriedly soaring over their heads. Of course, there were also many war horses that sprinted past them. In fact, several of them almost crashed into Ling Han and the others. "You guys, hurry up and turn around," some passing soldier said. "Be careful not to lose your life." What do they mean? A thought suddenly occurred to Ling Han, and he shouted, "Fuck! They're still being pursued." "Haha! Since you know, hurry up and flee," a soldier said with a loud laugh. Ling Han was exasperated, and he could only say, "Follow me." He didn't want to use the Black Tower before so many people. Moreover, he didn't want to rely on the Black Tower every time he came across some danger. Ling Han and the others also turned around to flee. However, because they had reacted too slowly, they were now stuck at the very back of the fleeing army. Glancing back, they could see another wave surging over from the distance. That was also a huge army, and they were carrying another flag with them. This flag was decorated with the word "Do." Sure enough, one army was fleeing, while the other army was pursuing. Fuck! Why do I always come across these situations? Ling Han sprinted as fast as he could, and the Empress and the others all followed behind him. They all felt extremely frustrated. Only Hunyo was giggling, finding this situation extremely interesting. Meanwhile, Xiao wore a naive and adorable expression. As long as there was no enemy, he would be in this indifferent state. One army was fleeing, while another army was pursuing. A battle had clearly been fought just then, and the army with the moon flag had been defeated. Thus they were fleeing. Behind them, the victorious army was relentlessly giving chase. This pursuit lasted for a whopping 15 days, at which time the pursuing army finally stopped and gave up on the chase. The fleeing army finally managed to catch a breath, no longer needing to advance in such disarray. During these 15 days, Ling Han also became quite familiar with these people. This army belonged to the moon-plucking celestial king, and it was referred to as the moon-plucking army. Of course, this was only one of the many armies under the flag of the moon-plucking army. Meanwhile, their opponent had been the refined cloud army, which belonged to the refined cloud celestial king. These two celestial kings controlled neighboring territories, so it wasn't unusual for large-scale battles to break out between them. War naturally ended with victors and losers. This time, the moon-plucking celestial king had suffered a small loss. Of course, neither the moon-plucking celestial king nor the refined cloud celestial king had participated in this battle. The two armies were simply led by the generals under them. During this time, Ling Han had also asked around for the Rock Palace's whereabouts. However, even though these people had heard of the Rock Palace, they weren't sure about where exactly it was located. The Eastern Celestial Realm was large, yet the Western Celestial Realm was even larger. The Eastern Celestial Realm possessed 33 heavens, while the Western Celestial Realm possessed 99 heavens. It was 3 times larger. For ordinary people, it would already be extremely impressive if they had traveled to the nearby 3 or 4 heavens before. Thus, if the Rock Palace were located 6 or 7 heavens away, it was indeed very difficult for these people to know where it was located. Perhaps the moon-plucking celestial king would know. However, could Ling Han ask the moon-plucking celestial king about such trivial matters? In fact, he wouldn't even be able to meet the celestial king. Ling Han felt extremely annoyed. They had clearly arrived at the Western Celestial Realm already, yet he felt like he had become a fool. He had no clue where to go next. Since that's the case, let's follow this army first, the Empress suggested. This was their only option. They would settle here first, and then they would make a plan for the future. This army was fairly friendly, and they didn't shoo Ling Han and the others away. They allowed them to travel together. 7 days later, the army finally arrived at their encampment. Ling Han and the others weren't allowed to enter, so they could only separate ways here. The soldiers gave them some guidance, and after walking north for around 3 days, a large city eventually appeared before them. We don't know where the Rock Palace is, but what about the Alchemy Holy Land or whatnot? Ling Han stroked his chin in thought. He should have come to the Western Celestial Realm with Ma Tongguang 1,000 years ago. However, Ma Tongguang had been killed, and he had thus lost his guide. At that time, he had also been lazy, so he hadn't studied much about the Western Celestial Realm. I remember Master calling that place the Universal Peace Heaven or something. Although the time has long passed, as the representative of the Eastern Celestial Realm, I should still go even if I'm late. Fine. Then our first stop will be the Universal Peace Heaven. Moreover, alchemists are involved in business with customers from all places, so it's extremely likely that they know the whereabouts of the Rock Palace. We'll rest for a while and then immediately set off. Ling Han made a decision, and the others naturally wouldn't oppose it. They decided to rest in this city for a few days, where they would also replenish their food supply and other necessities. They would then set off for the Universal Peace Heaven. The Western Celestial Realm had many local specialties, and spiritual herbs were one of these. Many spiritual herbs that were rare in the Eastern Celestial Realm were common goods here, and they were more so as cheap as dirt. It was no wonder that so many merchants were willing to travel tens of thousands of kilometers to this place. Even if the journey was filled with perilous dangers, the potential profit was far too astonishing. Ling Han also purchased many goods. Even though spiritual herbs couldn't help with one's comprehension, they could help one accumulate origin power. This was always helpful. Help! Help! Evil tyrants are trying to kidnap a woman. A woman shouted in a shrill voice. She ran over from the distance, and there were a dozen or so men chasing after her. They were all wearing sinister expressions. Chapter 2031. Fu Clan. A weak and helpless woman was being pursued by 10 powerful brutes. Wasn't this a typical case of kidnapping? Although the woman didn't appear too weak, with a 4th severance cultivation, the brutes chasing after her were all at the 3rd severance or 4th severance as well. As such, how could she hope to defeat them? Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his mind. As expected of the Western Celestial Realm, even severing mundane tier cultivators are so commonplace. Anyhow, that woman was indeed beautiful, with her skin pale like jade and her hair raven black. Her figure was also extremely shapely and alluring. As such, it wouldn't have been surprising if she had caught the attention of some evil young master, who had then commanded his underlings to kidnap her. The woman continued to scream as she ran, yet the louder she screamed, the quicker the people in the surroundings tried to avoid her. They appeared extremely afraid to be caught up in her trouble. After everyone retreated to the sides of the streets, Ling Han and his companions stuck out like a sore thumb. A hint of panic spread across the woman's face. She didn't know the intention of Ling Han and the others. Were they going to help her, or were they going to assist her kidnappers? She was running extremely quickly, and she sped past Ling Han and the others in a flash. Her expression immediately relaxed, and she continued to speed away into the distance. When the dozen or so brutes approached, a faint smile spread across Ling Han's face. He activated his regulation of slaughter. Wang! A terrifying aura exploded outward, causing the color to drain from the brutes' faces. They collapsed to the ground with several loud thuds. Was it possible for severing mundane tier cultivators to fall over for no reason? Naturally not. Moreover, it was a dozen or so of them falling over in unison. It was extremely evident that this was the doing of Ling Han and the others. Otherwise, why would they be standing in the middle of the road? Heavens! They actually dare to interfere with young Master Fu's affairs. They're definitely going to suffer great misfortune. Seriously, don't they know that the Fu clan is a powerful clan of United Link City? By the looks of it, they're all newcomers. That's definitely the case. The passers-by murmured among themselves, and they were all discussing this in a hushed tone. It was as if they were afraid of being overheard. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder these dogs were all at the severing mundane tier. If it weren't a powerful clan, how could they deploy so many powerful cultivators? However, he naturally wouldn't worry about this. To say nothing of the impressive battle prowess of himself and the others, wasn't there Xiao Gu to protect them even if they truly provoked a powerful elite? Let's go, Niu wants to eat meat, Hu Niu said in displeasure. She patted her stomach as she spoke. Let's go, Niu wants to eat meat, Xiao Gu repeated. He also started to pat his stomach. Ling Han could feel the beginning of a headache. Just Hu Niu alone was already enough trouble. Now, there was going to be another troublemaker. In any case, he naturally couldn't turn down Hu Niu's request. Thus, they started to look for a place to eat. They chit-chatted as they walked, and it was almost as if they had already forgotten about the small commotion just then. The passers-by exchanged surprised glances with each other. These people are far too confident. Indeed, they interfered with the Fu clan's matters, yet they still dare to act so calm and composed? Perhaps they came prepared? Tisk, haven't you heard of the saying? Even a powerful dragon can't defeat a snake in its nest. Don't they know that the Grand Elder of the Fu clan is the chief alchemist of the moon-plucking celestial king? Heh! In any case, they're definitely seeking death. Ling Han and the others didn't hear these remarks. This was because they had already found a restaurant, and started to chomp down on food. Delicious, delicious. Hu Niu had a drumstick in one hand and braised pork in another. Her mouth was also stuffed with food, yet she could still somehow manage to speak clearly. This was truly impressive. Xiao Gu tried to emulate her, yet his words came out completely scrambled. He couldn't speak clearly at all. It was clear that gluttons also needed talent. Ling Han, the Empress, and the others ordered some wine to drink. There were many aspects where the Western Celestial Realm was different from the Eastern Celestial Realm, and this also included the food culture. Thus, they all wanted to try some wine. You people seem to be in quite a good mood, someone said with a leisurely laugh. Ling Han and the others looked over, only to see someone at the door. However, because the light was coming from behind him, a long shadow was cast onto the floor. This also made him appear slightly more dignified. This was a smart-looking young man. He was wearing an azure robe, and his eyebrows were slightly raised, making him appear quite flamboyant. Young Master Fu. The customers in the restaurant immediately stood up and greeted him. Their voices were all filled with respect. The Fu clan was a formidable force in United Link City. This person was called Fu Yu, and he was the only third-generation member of the Fu clan. Thus, one could imagine just how lofty his status was. This was inevitable. The past 3 generations of the Fu clan all consisted of only a single person. Fu Yu wore a faint smile as he strode into the restaurant. He arrived beside Ling Han's table, and there was a skinny old man following behind him. This old man appeared tired and listless, and his eyes were shut the entire time. However, whenever he opened them, one could see the countless intertwining symbols on his eyeballs. His domineering aura would flash into the surroundings for a split second. Immortal Palace Tier? Ling Han speculated in his mind. This old man's power was profound and hard to fathom. He was so powerful that even Ling Han couldn't determine his power. Thus, he was at least at the Immortal Palace Tier. However, could he be an ascending origin tier elite? Ling Han truly didn't believe this. Would such an elite become the subordinate of a young man? After all, the Fu clan wasn't a celestial king tier force. You don't mind me sitting over here, do you? Fu Yu asked with a smile. However, he had already taken a seat before Ling Han and the others could even reply. Why the fuck did you ask? You don't mind me sitting over here, do you? Xiao Gu repeated. He was filled with excitement upon seeing this noob toy. A look of displeasure instantly spread across Fu Yu's face. What was the meaning of this? Was this person mocking him? He humphed and said, "Friend, don't think I don't know that it was you who attacked my useless subordinates." "Friend, don't think I don't know," Xiao Gu repeated without missing a word. Moreover, his skills had clearly improved, and he could even emulate one's tone and expression now. Fu Yu truly became angry at this moment. These people were taking things too far. Meanwhile, Ling Han was slightly astonished. Wasn't the Fu clan a formidable force? How did this young Master Fu have so much spare time? He had failed to kidnap a woman, so he was personally coming over now. Was he truly that given to lust? However, this didn't seem right. Whether or not one was given to lust, this could be easily determined through their actions. Right now, Niu, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro were all sitting at the table. They were three breathtaking beauties. However, Fu Yu could still remain undistracted. Indeed, he might steal a few glances here and there, but this was a completely normal reaction. Bam! Fu Yu slammed his hand on the table. His patience certainly wasn't great. However, this was understandable. As a respected youth, who wouldn't be afraid of him and yield to him? Moreover, he didn't know about Xiao Gu's habit of parroting others, so he thought that Xiao Gu was purposefully mocking him. As such, he naturally couldn't control his temper. Hey, don't mind him. He simply likes to copy others, Ling Han said with a smile. Hey, don't mind him, Xiao Gu repeated. He still liked to copy Ling Han the most. After all, this was the first person that he had met. Indeed, even his appearance was copying Ling Han's. Upon seeing this, Fu Yu's anger finally subsided a little. This person seemed to have some mental issues. Strange. One of the brothers is handsome and confident, yet the other one is stupid and slow. Was he beaten stupid in his mother's stomach? I'll also cut to the chase. Where's that woman? Fu Yu asked. Chapter 2032. Wild Imagination. That woman. Oh, the woman who was being pursued by the group of brutes? This was truly a loyal person. Was he unable to forget that woman? Ling Han shook his head and replied, I don't know what you're talking about. Friend, are you trying to deny that you attacked my subordinates just then? Fu Yu asked with a humph. A look of evident displeasure spread across his face. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, that can't be considered as attacking. If I'd truly attacked them, which of them would have survived? This was the truth. Those brutes were merely at the severing mundane tier, so with Ling Han's power as a dividing soul tier cultivator, he could have easily killed them with a single thought. Would you have dared to? Fu Yu asked. The Fu clan was a formidable force in United Link City. The Grand Elder of the Fu clan was more so the chief alchemist of the moon-plucking Celestial King, so who dared to provoke the Fu clan? I won't speak any nonsense with you. Hand that woman over. Otherwise, suffer the consequences. Fu Yu's tone was extremely tough. Ling Han laughed and said, sorry, but I don't know about any woman or any man or whatever. I suggest you ask someone else. How dare you? Fu Yu roared in rage. He reached over to grab at Ling Han. Wang! Numerous symbols materialized on his hand. Golden light dazzled, and he appeared much like a divine being. Ling Han was slightly astonished. He had truly underestimated this person. Fu Yu actually possessed an Earth Soul battle prowess. Moreover, his cultivation level was only at the Yin Soul, yet he was actually able to wield the battle prowess of an Earth Soul cultivator. He possessed the might of an Emperor tier. Ling Han reached over to grab Fu Yu's wrist. How audacious! Fu Yu said with a cold humph. Was this person retarded? They were both at the dividing soul tier, so they could only have a rough gauge of each other's major tier. In terms of minor level, they weren't able to determine this with any confidence. Only those who were sensitive enough could determine whether one's aura was stronger or weaker than their own. If they engaged in a fight, however, they would naturally be able to determine each other's cultivation level with ease. One of them was at the Yin Soul, and the other was at the Yang Soul. There was only one minor level between them. Moreover, Fu Yu was also an Emperor tier, so he could rival those one minor level above him and still be invincible. In other words, he could crush those at the Earth Soul. As such, how could Ling Han rival him? You're not trying to dodge, and you're even trying to grab my wrist instead. Just how audacious are you? Pa! There was a crisp crack as Fu Yu's wrist was grabbed by Ling Han. Ling Han's grip was extremely solid. What? Fu Yu was shocked, and his eyes were instantly filled with disbelief. Even the elder behind him suddenly opened his piercing eyes. It was as if celestial bodies were forming and collapsing, and this was an overwhelming aura that caused almost everyone in the restaurant to groan in pain. In fact, some people even started to cough blood. This was an Immortal Palace tier elite. Just his aura alone was already enough to severely wound severing mundane tier cultivators. Fortunately, Xiao reached over to protect the Empress and the others. He had clearly blocked the attack of an Immortal Palace tier elite with ease, yet his expression was still dazed, and he appeared especially muddle-headed and adorable. Fuck! The elder's eyes widened in astonishment. Just then, he had thought that Xiao was nothing more than a fool. However, this fool had actually reached the Immortal Palace tier. No! He had at least reached the Immortal Palace tier. The elder conceded that he couldn't determine Xiao's cultivation level. It was unfathomably profound. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Young people need to show respect. It's not good to throw punches. We need to convince other people with reason." The Empress Bewitching Maiden Ro, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden all smiled upon hearing this. Their husband always liked to pummel people for the smallest of conflicts. Yet, he was now encouraging someone else to convince people with reason? Wasn't this a joke? Only Niu chimed in with a serious expression, saying, "Niu also likes to convince people with reason. Brat, let's compete in eating. If you can't eat as much as Niu, then crawl on the ground like a dog." Fu Yu felt like his view of the world was collapsing. A young soul cultivator had managed to easily grab his wrist, and he couldn't break free from his grasp no matter what. Not only that, but his foolish brother had even managed to block the attack of his guardian. How was this group so powerful? Perhaps this was all part of an elaborate conspiracy? Perhaps their aim was to draw him out and then capture him so that they could demand a ransom from the Fu clan. What audacity! They were subordinates of the moon-plucking Celestial King, and his grandfather was more so the chief alchemist. In fact, he could be viewed as a favored subordinate of the Celestial King. To target the Fu clan. Wasn't this equivalent to provoking the moon-plucking Celestial King? What in the world do you people want? The more danger he was in, the more composed Fu Yu became. He possessed the demeanor of an emperor tier. Ling Han was slightly surprised, and he said, "You targeted me first, yet you're asking me what I want? Aren't you twisting the facts a little?" "Humph. Enough with the nonsense. You're after a ransom, aren't you?" Fu Yu said. "This." Fu Yu cut Ling Han off, and immediately said, 100 million starstones. That's enough, right? This is the final offer. Otherwise, the deal is off. Fu Yu said in a resolute voice. Ling Han was rendered speechless. He had never even thought about becoming a kidnapper. Moreover, even though he had grabbed Fu Yu's wrist, had that not been an act of self-defense? Why had the situation suddenly elevated to one of kidnapping and ransom? Moreover, it had taken this twist in such a smooth fashion. Upon seeing Ling Han's silence, Fu Yu took it as a sign of agreement. He turned to the elder and said, "Uncle Yu, can you please go and bring 100 million starstones over?" "Young master, then what about your safety?" the elder asked in concern. His task was to protect Fu Yu, yet not only had he failed, but he even had to temporarily leave. What if the other party didn't honor the deal? Rest assured, I'm confident that these people aren't fools. They understand that I'm only valuable if I'm alive, Fu Yu said in a composed voice. He appeared extremely calm and relaxed. Understood, the elder replied. Without any more hesitation, he turned around to leave. Please wait for a moment. 100 million starstones will take some time to gather, Fu Yu said. His expression was as if he were in control, even though he had fallen into their hands. Ling Han and the others exchanged confused glances, and they could all see the thought in each other's eyes. This dumb C*** and T. Sigh. Ling Han loosened his grip and said, "Say, is your imagination a bit wild?" Fu Yu rubbed his sore wrist and said, "Friend, you've already gained the upper hand, so is there any need to mock me?" He naturally wouldn't think Ling Han was letting him go. Instead, Ling Han and the others were brimming with confidence. Even if they didn't restrict him, he still wouldn't be able to flee. Ling Han patted Fu Yu's shoulder and said, "You're definitely the most imaginative person that I've come across." Fu Yu naturally thought that Ling Han was teasing him, so he simply replied with a cold humph. Ling Han shook his head and said, "What if I told you that I don't know that woman at all? Would you believe me?" "You don't believe me, huh?" However, this is indeed the truth. I was simply displeased with seeing so many brutes chasing a weak woman. Just then, you were also the one who attacked me first, so I was merely acting in self-defense. However, your imagination took flight, and you thought that I was kidnapping you for a ransom. Ha 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 ha. Fu Yu didn't believe Ling Han at first. Fuck. Do you think I'm stupid? He humphed and said, then I'm going to leave now. You won't stop me, will you? Please, Ling Han said as he pointed at the door. Fu Yu was extremely suspicious as he walked over. Upon seeing that Ling Han and the others weren't attempting to stop him, he turned around and said, I'm really going to leave now. Please. Chapter 2033. Searching for the culprit. Fu Yu walked out of the restaurant. However, after a brief moment, he stuck his head back in, saying, I'm really going to leave. Ling Han nodded in reply, gesturing for him to do as he pleased. Fu Yu walked out of the restaurant again. However, after a short moment, he surprisingly entered again, walking over and sitting next to Ling Han. This was genuinely a misunderstanding, he asked in puzzlement. Ling Han and the others replied with a nod. Even though this person was an emperor tier, he was more so a clown. Fu Yu could barely believe that he had caused such a ruckus over nothing. However, he had indeed been able to leave freely just then. This was proof that Ling Han and the others hadn't been lying to him. Fuck. He had truly become a clown. His face flushed red as he sighed with embarrassment. After a long while he said, I might have misunderstood you guys, but this isn't without reason. He paused for a moment before continuing, in fact, you guys also misunderstood me. I'm not someone who abuses my power to harass others. I've gathered so, Ling Han said with a nod. Otherwise, he wouldn't have treated Fu Yu with such politeness. There were far too many sinister tyrants and perverts in the world, and Ling Han wouldn't mind punishing them if he came across them. If Fu Yu had truly been such a person, he would have already been a corpse now. That woman pretended to be a maid to enter my clan, yet she stole the undying pill that my grandfather had just finished refining. This was discovered by the other servants, and this was what led to me pursuing her. I immediately gave chase after receiving the news, but it was already too late, Fu Yu said. Ha! So this is how it was? Is that so? Ling Han asked with a frown. If this were true, then he had truly committed evil with good intentions. Not a word is false. I swear on the reputation of the Fu clan. Fu Yu said with a solemn expression. Ling Han nodded and said, then this was truly all a big misunderstanding. They had misunderstood why the members of the Fu clan had been pursuing the woman. Meanwhile, Fu Yu had mistakenly thought that Ling Han and the others were trying to kidnap him for a ransom. Ling Han immediately stood up and said, then let's look for her. This is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Where do we even start? Fu Yu said with a sigh. The population of United Link City numbered in the tens of billions, and this city was more so astoundingly large. Trying to find a specific person was as difficult as ascending the heavens. Niu will look for her. Hu Niu volunteered. Fu Yu didn't feel any confidence at all. This was someone who had challenged someone else to an eating contest. What could she possibly achieve? However, Ling Han chuckled and said, Niu, lead the way. Hu Niu immediately stood up to leave. However, after taking a few steps, she hurriedly ran back to package all of the leftover food. Only then did she stride away. Fu Yu instantly felt even less confident. He couldn't help but shake his head. Let's go, Ling Han said as he grabbed Fu Yu. With his strength, Fu Yu naturally couldn't resist him. They left the restaurant and returned to where they had first encountered the woman. Hu Niu wrinkled her nose and started to sniff the surroundings. After a while, she pointed at some road and said, over there. Fuck. Do you have a dog nose? Fu Yu couldn't help but diss in his mind. However, he naturally didn't dare to say this out aloud. Moreover, Hu Niu was so breathtakingly beautiful, so he definitely couldn't bring himself to say this. Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others were filled with confidence in Hu Niu's abilities. Her nose was even more powerful than that of a dog. They continued to follow Hu Niu, who would stop from time to time before taking twists and turns, and even ascending and descending mountains. After 2 entire days, they finally arrived at a small village. There was smoke rising from chimneys, and there were dogs barking in joy. This was true countryside scenery. Hunyou pointed at the village and said, "Right here." Here? Fuyu naturally didn't believe her. He shook his head in doubt. "Let's go," Ling Han said as he dragged Fuyu along. They entered the village, and they were immediately surrounded by a group of children whose eyes were completely drawn to the Empress and Hunyou. They had never seen such beautiful people before. These women were completely like celestial maidens. Ling Han and the others stopped before an extremely ordinary-looking house. "Here?" Fuyu asked. He couldn't help but shake his head in disappointment. He had heard from his subordinates that the woman was at the severing mundane tier. Even though severing mundane tier cultivators couldn't be regarded as elites in the celestial realm, they were still definitely respectable beings. In some small cities, they could even assemble their own forces and become a powerful ruler. As such, would they hold themselves up in such a rural place? Who would believe this? However, Ling Han turned to the children and asked, "Do any of you know who lives here? The first one to answer will get 2 pieces of candy." He immediately retrieved 2 pieces of candy. I know. I also know." The children fought to answer his question. In fact, even Hunyou felt extremely tempted. After all, this candy had initially been prepared to tempt her. "A big brother and a big sister live here. The big sister is very beautiful. However, she's not as beautiful as these big sisters. They've only lived here for 2 years. The big brother got sick, and he's always coughing. In fact, I've even seen him cough blood." Ling Han smiled and took out some more candy to hand to the children. He then said, "All right, go and play now." The children immediately ran off. Ling Han pushed open the bamboo gate in front of the house, revealing a dainty path that was decorated with beautiful flowers on either side. This was in stark contrast to the simplicity of the rest of the village. Meanwhile, the door to the house was only slightly shut, and Ling Han immediately heard coughing before he had even pushed it open. With a slight push he opened the door, revealing extremely ordinary furniture. There was only a single table, wardrobe, and bed. Lying on the bed was a man who was violently coughing. In fact, he was spitting blood as he coughed, and it was as if he were about to cough his internal organs out. "Cough. Who are you?" the man asked when he saw Ling Han. He raised his head with much difficulty, and Ling Han saw that he was a fairly handsome man. However, his face was far too pale, and there wasn't a single hint of color. Fuyu suddenly wrinkled his nose and exclaimed, "There's the scent of the undying pill." He immediately jumped forward and said, "You ingested the undying pill." The man was shocked, and he hurriedly shook his head, saying, "I didn't eat any undying pill. You people have got it wrong. I don't know what you're talking about." Fu Yu's feeling of doubt vanished into thin air. Hunyou had indeed found the right place. Moreover, the undying pill had already been ingested by this man. He was filled with scorching rage. His grandfather had refined the undying pill at the command of the moon-plucking celestial king. Yet, it had been ingested by this person now? How would they explain this to the moon-plucking celestial king? "Don't worry, we don't have any evil intentions," Ling Han said with a smile. He placed a hand on the man before activating his source power of wood. A power that was brimming with vitality instantly surged into the man's body, causing his fit of coughing to immediately cease. In fact, a hint of healthy red returned to his pale face. "You've been wounded by someone," Ling Han said. "That person most likely had the ability to kill you, yet they only left you with severe wounds. Such sinister intentions. They wanted to torture you to death." The man's expression changed again and again. In the end, he could only heave a long sigh and say, "You're right. That's indeed the case." "Tell us about it," Ling Han said in interest. He had initially thought that the woman had stolen the undying pills to sell or exchange for other benefits. By the looks of it, however, that definitely wasn't the case. There were 10 undying pills in total. You definitely haven't ingested all of them. So where are the rest of them? Fu Yu cut in. "Oi, do you know how to speak? Can't you see that he's sick?" Ling Han said as he picked Fu Yu up and tossed him aside. He turned back to the man and said, "All right, you can tell us now. Take it slow." Fu Yu couldn't help but feel vexed. He was the grandson of a 4-star alchemist. Was it really necessary for Ling Han to treat him like this? Chapter 2034. Story. My name is Gua Ming, the man said, starting to recount his story. I was born into an ordinary family, but my cultivation talent was fairly decent. Thus, I joined the Star Moon sect to cultivate. In a chance of fate, I met a person. She was Lu Xueyan, my current wife. Xueyan was the granddaughter of the third elder of the Star Moon sect, so her status was far superior to that of me, a measly outer disciple. Initially, I thought that I didn't stand a chance with Xueyan. However, who can predict fate? Yet, when Xueyan and I fell in love, we were immediately faced with strong opposition. Not only did the third elder oppose us, but the seventh elder also opposed us. The third elder wanted to win the support of the seventh elder, so he desired for both of their descendants to join together in marriage. The seventh elder had a great-grandson called Ruan Dongxia, and he already had feelings for Xueyan to begin with. With the support of his elders, he was naturally able to linger around Xueyan all the time. Xueyan pushed back against the third elder's proposal of arranged marriage several times, yet her complaints were ignored each time. At the same time, she naturally remained cold and indifferent to Ruan Dongxiang. This caused Ruan Dongxiang to greatly detest me, so he used his 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike to severely wound me. He wanted me to die in great agony. When Xueyan learned of this, she immediately took me with her to leave the Star Moon sect. In order to avoid capture, we carefully concealed our tracks along the way. However, upon reaching this place, my wounds had already deteriorated to an uncontrollable state. We had no choice but to stop. Upon learning that there was a skilled alchemist here, Xueyan went over to work as a maid. After toiling away for 2 years, she finally managed to sneak into the alchemy room to steal the undying pills for me. This was all because of me. Xueyan is innocent. Do whatever you want, but target me instead. Woohoo, so pitiful, someone said through sobs. They looked over, only to see tears streaming down Fu Yu's face. This was a fairly exaggerated reaction. Ling Han and the others exchanged a glance. They couldn't help but think that this person was fairly sentimental and easily moved. Just then, he had still wanted to slice open this man's stomach to retrieve the undying pill. Now, however, he was sobbing uncontrollably after hearing Guoming's tragic story. Oi, your reaction is far too exaggerated, no? Ling Han said as he patted Fu Yu's shoulder. Aren't you moved? Fu Yu asked through sobs. A little bit. However, not to the same extent as you, Ling Han said. He couldn't help but shiver. Had this person reincarnated into the wrong body? How was he so sentimental and emotional? He should have reincarnated as a woman. At the very least, others most likely wouldn't find it weird if a woman were moved to tears. Woo, so pitiful. So pitiful. Fu Yu sobbed. He completely ignored Ling Han and the others. Even Guoming was rendered speechless. Even though he was the protagonist of the story, and even though he would also feel pained at times, how could a man shed tears so easily? How could they be reduced to such a state? To say nothing else, even Xueyan hadn't cried so miserably before. Oi, how long are you going to embarrass yourself for? Ling Han asked with a sigh. Don't disturb me. Let me cry for a bit longer. Hunyo immediately lost her patience. Pa! With a kick, Fu Yu was instantly sent flying, smashing a hole into the mud and straw house. He then transformed into a small black dot that vanished into the distance. Poor child. Brother Ming! A female voice exclaimed in worry. A woman immediately rushed into the house. She was none other than Lu Xueyan, the weak woman that Ling Han and the others had encountered before. Upon seeing the people in the room, all of whom she had encountered before, the color immediately drained from Lu Xueyan's face. They had been exposed? Their victims were here to settle the debt now. This has nothing to do with Brother Ming. It was all my doing. Whatever punishment you have in mind, target me, she shouted. No, it was all because of me. Punish me. Guoming hurriedly exclaimed. It was me. No, it was me. The two of them fought to take responsibility for the crime. This was truly a moving scene. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head and say, "Are you too stupid? You still want to shoulder the responsibility alone? We're naturally going to capture both of you." "No, you can't do that," Guoming and Lu Xueyan exclaimed. They wore terrified expressions as they furiously shook their heads. "Xueyan, let's become husband and wife again in our next life." "All right, Brother Ming." The lovers exchanged a glance before suddenly slapping at their own temples. They were going to shatter their own divine senses to commit suicide. Ling Han immediately reached over. Wang! A powerful force surged forth, forcefully stopping the two people's movements. "Say, are you two a bit too impulsive?" he said with a sigh. "I never said that I would capture you." "That's right, huh?" Guoming and Lu Xueyan exchanged a glance, and they could both see the lingering fear in each other's eyes. They had almost committed suicide for love. Ling Han was rendered speechless. What in the world were they feeling relieved about? If he hadn't interfered, they would have already died. Why did he always come across such people? Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "This poisonous wound. I reckon I can treat it." "For real?" Guoming and Lu Xueyan exclaimed. They could barely believe what they were hearing. Ling Han nodded and asked, "That Ruan Dongxia was most likely at the dividing soul tier, am I correct? Was he at the heaven soul or earth soul?" "Earth soul," Lu Xueyan immediately replied. She instantly felt more confident in Ling Han's abilities. If Ruan Dongxia had been at the Immortal Palace tier, Ling Han would have been powerless to help. However, since he was at the same major tier as Ling Han could still use his source power of wood to help. This source power possessed the most powerful vitality, so in theory, it could treat all kinds of wounds. There were many people who needed help in this world, and Ling Han wasn't trying to be a savior, either. He wouldn't stick his nose into everyone's business. However, since he had come across this situation, he was naturally willing to do his part to help. "Woo, so pitiful. We definitely have to help them," Fu Yu said as he returned. His eyes were already puffy from crying. This person was beyond saving. "You guys go outside first. I need to channel some cultivation technique to treat him," Ling Han said. Yes, yes," Lu Xueyan hurriedly replied with a nod. If Ling Han harbored evil intentions, there was absolutely no need for him to go to so much trouble. He could have directly attacked them. After all, neither of them was a match for Ling Han. "You go outside as well," Ling Han said to Fu Yu. "Ha! I also need to go outside?" Fu Yu asked in a daze. Go out," Hunyo said. She walked over and picked Fu Yu up before striding out. Ling Han was naturally shooing everyone away to keep the secret of his black tower. After everyone left, Ling Han knocked Guoming unconscious with a palm strike before drawing him into the black tower. The power of time flowed, and the black tower started to experience a timescale 1,000 times faster than the outside world. Ling Han started to treat Guoming, activating his source power of wood and funneling it into his body. He started to eliminate the poison bit by bit. If Ling Han fought with Ruan Dongxia, he could most likely dispose of him in a few hundred exchanges. However, eliminating the poison that the man had left in Guoming's body was a much more difficult task. In simple terms, destruction was much easier than construction. Not to mention, this was a case of large-scale construction after large-scale destruction. This could only be resolved with effort and time. Moreover, this was only because Ling Han was practicing the indestructible Heaven's Scroll and possessed extraordinary comprehension of life and death that far surpassed that of ordinary dividing soul-tier cultivators. Otherwise, most cultivators only knew how to fight and kill. As for healing and saving, impossible. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, 3 years had already passed in the Black Tower. Only at this time did Ling Han finally retract his hand. He breathed a long sigh of relief. He had already eliminated the poison in Guoming's body. A smile spread across his face. During this process, he gained an even deeper understanding of how to channel the source power of wood. Not only had he saved someone, but he had even received some benefits himself. Sure enough, the heavens wouldn't treat good people unfairly. Chapter 2035. Arrival of Ruan Dongxiang. Ling Han exited the Black Tower with Guoming, and shouted, You can all enter now. Brother Ming, Lu Xueyan exclaimed as she immediately rushed in. She focused her gaze on Guoming, who was currently lying on the bed. After observing him for a brief moment, she was instantly as moved as could be. His face was a healthy shade of red, and his aura was also extremely stable. There were no signs of any wound. He had been healed, fully healed. Moreover, it had only taken a single day. She immediately fell to her knees and said, "Benefactor." Ling Han made a waving motion, pulling her up from the ground. He then shook Guoming awake. Xueyan. Brother Ming. The pair of lovers erupted into tears as they embraced. They had just escaped from the clutches of death, so they were naturally filled with an overwhelming sensation of relief. Brother Ming, have you truly recovered? Lu Xueyan murmured. Yes, I've made a full recovery. I'm not dreaming, am I? No. They were overtaken with emotion, and they surprisingly started to passionately lock lips as if no one were around. So moving, Fu Yu remarked. Upon seeing Fu Yu's reaction, Ling Han felt like he could never take him seriously anymore. He would definitely be blinded by his emotional displays. Ling Han, Nyo also wants a kiss. Hu Nyo said. She stuck her lips out as she shuffled over. Ling Han laughed heartily, and he quickly turned around to peck Hu Nyo's lips. Bewitching Maiden Rose shuffled over and said, I also want one. Go find some shade. Bewitching Maiden Rose couldn't help but feel disappointed. This stinky man. All she wanted was a kiss. Did he really need to be so stingy? Kiss, kiss. Shirley and Yu shouted from the side. Lu Xueyan. Someone roared in a thundering voice. Lu Xueyan's and Guoming's expression instantly changed. They were far too familiar with this voice. This voice belonged to none other than the person who had caused them so much pain and suffering. Ruan Dongxia. Did you think you could escape from my palm? Ruan Dongxia asked. I only remained hidden to let you suffer the consequence of daring to steal my woman. In 3 days, the poisonous wound on Guoming's body will fully erupt. In 7 days, he'll die a violent death. I'm going to accompany you as we watch this trash die an agonizing death. After that, I'll take you back. What should we do? Lu Xueyan asked as she looked at Guoming. They had finally healed his wounds after going to so much trouble, yet Ruan Dongxia had already caught up to them. It was as if he were driving them to death. Guoming gritted his teeth before suddenly kneeling down to Ling Han and saying, Benefactor, I know that I already owe you a life, so I shouldn't beg you for any more help. However, I genuinely have no other options, so I can only beg you for help. I hope that you can help my wife safely leave this place. As my gratitude, I have a treasure that I'm willing to give you. Brother Ming, no. Xueyan exclaimed as she leaped onto Guoming. We either live together or die together. Xueyan. The two of them wrapped their arms around each other. Ha 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 ha. Cry, cry to your heart's content. Savor your last moments together. Ruan Dongxia roared with a wanton laugh. As he gazed at this pair of lovers, Ling Han involuntarily thought of his own parents. At that time, they had most likely gone through a similar experience. The difference was that his mother had already been pregnant with him. Since he had just saved Guoming's life, he naturally couldn't watch him die just like that. He chuckled to himself before exiting the small house. Who are you? Ruan Dongxia asked as he saw this unfamiliar man walking out of the house. His face involuntarily darkened. Fuck. This B*Tsich isn't cucking me, is she? However, several women followed after Ling Han, and each of them was breathtakingly beautiful. He couldn't help but gulp in lust. At this moment, he completely forgot about the fact that Lu Xueyan might have cucked him. Me? Ling Han asked with a faint smile. I'm just a passerby. Ruan Dongxia humphed and said, Since you know that you're a passerby, you also understand that this has got nothing to do with you, right? Don't stick your nose into other people's business. I've never liked sticking my nose into other people's business. I simply want to pummel you, Ling Han said. Pummel me? Ruan Dongxia faltered for a moment. When he came to his senses, he involuntarily laughed and said, Do you know who I am? I do. You're a piece of trash. Ruan Dongxia's expression instantly darkened. I'm the great-grandson of the 7th elder of the Star Moon sect. My great-grandfather is an immortal palace tier elite. In the celestial realm, immortal palace tier cultivators could indeed be referred to as elites. Oh, what's that got to do with me? Ling Han asked. Does it have anything to do with me pummeling you? I'm also an Earth Soul elite. Ruan Dongxia continued. With my strength and with my background, you still want to challenge me? You speak too much nonsense, Ling Han said as he strode toward Ruan Dongxia. What a troublemaker. Ruan Dongxia spat in disgust. However, a sinister smile crept across his face when he swept his gaze over the Empress and the others. However, I should thank you for bringing me so many beauties. Smack. His smile had barely spread across his face when he suddenly suffered a heavy punch to the cheek. He was instantly sent flying. You actually dared to hit me? Ruan Dongxia asked in incredulity as he picked himself up from the ground. He rubbed his nose and glanced at his hand, only to see that it was filled with blood. He couldn't help but tremble. He wasn't trembling in fear, but rather in fury. From birth until now, who had ever hit him before? Moreover, this was a strike to the face. You've made me angry now. He shook his right hand, and strands of light immediately appeared in the air. There were 7 strands in total. 7 blooms, 7 poisons, palm strike. Xueqi exclaimed. She had also walked out with Guoming. There was intense fear in her voice. After all, her lover had been tortured by this poisonous attack for so many years. In fact, he had almost been tortured to an agonizing death. Be careful, benefactor, Lu Xueqi hurriedly said in warning. This poisonous palm strike is the ultimate technique of the 7th Elder's branch. According to rumors, he learned this technique from an ancient Ruan. In fact, it might even be an ascending origin tier secret technique. Ling Han simply replied with a smile. He didn't take this warning to heart. Cleansing the poison from Guoming's body had indeed been difficult. However, with his physique, only those at or above the immortal palace tier could hope to poison him. After all, poison was also a regulation of heaven and earth. This was no different from any other regulation. That's right. This is the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike, Ruan Dongxia said with pride. Those who are struck by the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike will suffer for an entire 7 years, during which time 7 flowers will bloom on their bodies. When these 7 flowers reach full bloom, the victim will die of decomposition within 7 days. He glanced at Guoming with a cold chuckle, and said, the 7th flower has most likely bloomed inside him already. Death is already knocking on the door, huh? Strange. Why is his face such a healthy shade of red? Why does he look completely fine? Impossible. This is far too strange. Perhaps my poison was cleansed. How is that possible? Ruan Dongxia was confident that even immortal palace tier elites couldn't cleanse the poison of the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike. The reason for this was simple. Destruction was far easier than construction. His poison had already become one with Guoming's body, so trying to cleanse the poison would inevitably require destroying Guoming's body. Thus, cleansing the poison would be equivalent to killing Guoming. That being the case, his poison naturally couldn't be cleansed. Perhaps ascending origin tier elites could give it a try. However, since the most powerful member of the Star Moon sect was only at the Immortal Palace tier, he naturally couldn't invite an ascending origin tier elite to try and cleanse his poison. Guoming's eyes were bloodshot, and he said, Ruan Dongxia, you didn't expect this, did you? Your poison has actually been cleansed. His expression was as if he wanted to eat Ruan Dongxia alive. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.